The amnesiac wanderer Viltok was caught up in a conspiracy to overthrow the Dragon Kingdom while searching for himself. As the thick fog gradually dissipated, he was surprised to find that the person who caused his amnesia was actually himself. At this moment, the enemy hidden behind the scenes is quietly approaching, while Viltok is in a dilemma of betrayal and estrangement. This book is a sequel to The Extraordinary Noble. Novel keywords. Pale Emblem without pop-ups, Pale Emblem TXT Complete Collection Download, Pale Emblem Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Mysterious Visitors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Mysterious Visitors. Another spring, warm and humid air flows over the solid and thick clay walls of Bolong Town, signaling the revival of all things and awakening this adventurer town built deep in the forest from hibernation. Borang Town belongs to the fallen leaf city of the Desa League and is named after its proximity to Borang Lake. She is far away from the main city, with a straight line distance of over 300 kilometers, and there is also an 80-kilometer-wide primitive forest belt in the middle. The journey is far away, coupled with numerous dangers. Even the armed caravans of high-altitude clans rarely visit here. The Fallen Leaf City Council pays no attention to the town of Borang, except for the regular security guards sent by the city hall. Only adventure groups of all sizes enter and exit this remote town. In fact, Bolong Town is a typical adventurer autonomous stronghold, under the jurisdiction of the Adventurer Union in Fallen Leaf City. It does not need to pay any taxes to the city-state council, but is responsible for guarding the outskirts of the main city and providing essential logistical support for adventurers. More than 1,000 years ago, the half-elves of the Daisha City-State Alliance, the barbarians of the Black Fire Tribe, and the orcs of the Ulu Goblin Kingdom signed the Azure Contract in the presence of the Dragon King's palace, recognizing the Dragon King Philomat and the Azure Wings as the three co-owners, establishing the Dragon Kingdom, dividing their respective territories, and agreeing not to infringe upon each other's core territories. The three ethnic forces thus ended the more than 400-year-long war. However, in order to satisfy the endless thirst of Dragon King Philomat for treasure and expand his own sphere of influence, the three major forces of the Dragon Kingdom coincidentally sent small troops to explore and collect various resources on the outskirts, and tried to encroach on the opponent's territory. The semi-elf adventurers of the Daisha Alliance, the barbarian raiders of the Black Fire Tribe, and the orc bone collectors of the Goblin Kingdom emerged. They fight fiercely on the edge, seeking wealth and status. The adventurer's home is the only hotel in Bolong Town, with a spacious living room and few customers. The hotel owner Bartom sat behind the bar, holding a dark cloth and weakly wiping the empty wine glass. He appears to be in his 40s, but his actual age may be even older. He has thick red short hair mixed with frosty white, and his greasy face hides traces of wind and snow. His brown eyes are drowsy, occasionally revealing terrifying radiance. An old cloth robe didn't fit well due to his broad shoulders and sturdy chest, and even looked a bit comical. No one will laugh at Bartom, and those who are qualified to laugh at him do not like to joke, while those with smooth tongues dare not laugh at him. At least in the town of Borang, the hotel owner Bartom is a leading figure. The adventurers of the Disa Alliance are all rebellious fugitives, but no adventurer would offend the union leaders of the outpost. Boss Bartom is the head of the Adventurers Guild in Borang Town, and his current position has been obtained through his own abilities. As the leader of the Adventurers Union stationed in Borang Town, Bartom has a complete monopoly on the hotel business in the town. Over the years, he has earned a lot of money and also gained his own business experience. Spring is a season full of hope, with warmer weather, melting ice and snow, making it easier to obtain food, and a wide variety. But the beasts in the Black Forest also woke up from hibernation, hungry and becoming particularly fierce. Adventurers must leave the Yongu stronghold before the ice and snow completely melt, either go to the wilderness to search for treasure, or return to the City of Fallen Leaves with their spoils, in exchange for the wealth and status they deserve. For hotels in Bolong Town, spring is undoubtedly the worst time of the year for business. Bartom began to consider dismissing some of the hotel staff and introducing them as temporary guides for the adventure group. Although the guide's commission belongs to the assistant personally, he can save some wages. The two-way wooden door of the hotel was suddenly pushed open from outside, and 3 figures dressed as adventurers appeared against the light at the door. The young and clever shop assistant, Pyru, was the first to greet him and said earnestly, "Customer, are you here to hire a guide?" "My name is Pyru, the best scout hunter in Bolong town." "Pyru, get out of here and brag when you reach adulthood. Perhaps some fools will believe that you are the best scout hunter in Bolong town. Didn't you even see that these guests need medical treatment?" Bartom walked out from behind the bar, pushed away Pyru with a green face, and quickly looked at the 3 unwelcome guests, feeling suspicious. These 3 adventurers have at least 2 women, one of whom is tall, with brown-green hair tied in a single ponytail, grayish-green eyes, features as sharp as knives and axes, dressed in battle dress equipment, revealing long legs and arms with obvious muscle contours, 4 barbed spears hanging from the back, and 2 short blades tied to the outer thighs. The whole person exudes a strong, wild, and ruthless aura. Her external features and fierce temperament all indicate that she is a HME female warrior. The Khmer tribe is a minority among the half-elves of Disa, but it is common in adventure groups, and they are also the main force of adventure groups. That's right, all the HME people are women. They are brave and good at fighting, have a wild temperament, do not engage in childbirth, do not raise children, love fighting and plundering, and especially discriminate against semi-elf males. It is said that the Herm tribe is a semi-elf tribe favored by the Mother Earth. Every year during the water season, Herm female warriors hold a life sacrifice ceremony, and the Mother Earth will heal the damage they have suffered throughout the year. Some advanced Herm female warriors even possess the terrifying power of ice. Bartom has never seen a high-level Hermione female warrior, nor does he know if this rumor is true or false. But he has participated in the life sacrifice of the HME tribe more than once, and that was truly an indescribable unique experience. This HME female warrior has scars on her legs and arms, indicating that she has been active in the wilderness for the past year and has experienced multiple battles. Another adventurer is a young female half-elf, wearing a warm animal skin cotton robe with a leather lining exposed at the collar. She is average in stature, with brown ear-length short hair and lake green eyes. Her appearance is neither beautiful nor unattractive, and she looks very ordinary. It is precisely because it is ordinary that it stands out. The adventure group has both Herm female warriors and semi-elf males, with only a few common semi-elf females. Bartom also noticed that the young lady had a calm gaze, a calm temperament, and a gentle charm, which was something called parenting in the women of the Fallen Heights. A cultured Highland woman would not appear in an adventure group, and Bartom estimated that she had a Highland background, possibly as a servant maid of a certain Highland noble family. However, the adventurer's stronghold and the city-state are completely different worlds, and even if she has a background in Highland aristocrats, she must follow the adventurer's rules in the town of Borang. This young lady was not wearing any weapons, only a pair of worn-out sickle-shaped bone blades hanging on her belt, which may have been loot seized from some orc bone collector or barbarian raider. Bartom only glanced at them and didn't think they had any value, so he shifted his sharp gaze to the last guest. The third adventurer was covered tightly from head to toe with a thick leather robe, and his appearance and gender were indistinguishable. He had weak limbs and relied on 2 companions to support him with their shoulders to prevent him from falling. Bartom had a keen eye and immediately saw that the adventurer was injured and unconscious. "There is a good room upstairs, let's go up and talk." Bartom calmly led the 3 adventurers towards the stairs of the hotel, without attracting the attention of the other guests. These unfamiliar adventurers must be strange, maybe bad, maybe good, but Bartom is confident that in the town of Borang, he can turn most bad things into good things, at least not make bad things worse. Arriving at the innermost room on the 4th floor of the hotel, Bartom took out the key, opened the door, and let the guests in first. He then discreetly glanced left and right to make sure no one was watching before entering the room and turning to close the door. This room is very clean, with a layer of soft grass woven carpet on the stone floor, a large wooden bed placed in the middle, with thick bearskin mats on top. On the long table across from the bed is a pottery and stone vase, with a bouquet of peach branches inserted inside. Although there are no bright flowers, tender buds have sprouted, adding a touch of moving greenery to this bedroom. The window to the south is wide open, and standing in front of it, you can see the forest scenery outside Bolong town. The female adventurer who was suspected of being a Highlander was obviously satisfied with this room. She looked around several times before turning to Bartom and saying, "Dear Sir Red Lion, my name is Lena, this is my sister Zine, and we are adventurers of the White Horn Adventure Group. I have something to ask for your help." Compared to her ordinary appearance, her voice is gentle and pleasant, very gentle, making people feel good at first hearing it. Boss Bartom chuckled and asked, "Do you know me?" The female adventurer who claimed to be Lena nodded slightly and said sincerely, "Few adventure groups have never heard of the reputation of Red Lion Bartom. You are generous, value your reputation, and are a respected adventurer." Bartom didn't take Lena's compliments to heart and chuckled, "There's definitely no such thing as a generous reputation, but it's true to value credibility. Let me tell you, if you have any difficulties or need my help, as long as the price satisfies me, I will try my best to satisfy you." Lena leaned against the windowsill and smiled, saying, "A few months ago, our companion was injured in battle and couldn't continue his adventure. Therefore, we want to keep him at the Adventure Union in Bolong Town. Please take care of him for a while, and send someone to pick him up after we finish this adventure." "No problem, taking care of injured adventurers is a responsibility of the Stronghold Guild." Bartom patted his chest boldly, with a hint of subtle cunning flashing in his eyes, and then said, "So, according to the rules of the Adventurer Stronghold, I have to ask you a few questions, and you also need to prepare a fee. You can ask. As for the cost of taking care of the injured, we can discuss it at the end." "Okay." Bartom put away his smile and turned around to look at the Hermione warrior who placed the injured patient on the bed. He turned his head and asked Lena, "Miss Lena, do you seem to be Miss Highland?" The half-elf adventurer shook her head and said, "The true Highland lady is beautiful, elegant, knowledgeable, and intelligent. Obviously, I am not, but I once served a Highland lady in the Highlands of Rapids. For some inconvenient reasons, I left Rapids Highlands and joined the White Horn Adventure as a physician and pharmacist." "Oh. Miss Lena is still a doctor and pharmacist?" Bartom raised his thick eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, I am a third-level physician and third-level pharmacist, certified by Torrens College in Rapid City." Bartom revered him deeply, but ordinary adventure groups did not require doctors, because adventurers more or less knew some medical emergency methods. As long as the HME female warrior was not disabled with a broken hand or foot, every winter, after completing the life sacrifice ceremony, her injuries would automatically heal without leaving any sequelae. There is only one situation where the adventure team will invite physicians to join, and that is the mobile village of the HME tribe. They are nominally an alliance adventure group, but in fact, they are a nomadic HME group that makes a living by hunting and robbing. This type of adventure group has a fierce style and is at a close distance from the Adventurers Union. Sometimes, they even resort to black-handed tactics against the registered adventure groups in the alliance, forcibly absorbing the female warriors of the Hemer tribe, squeezing male adventurers clean, and then selling them as slaves to certain forces. In short, the wandering villages of the HME ethnic group are not easy to deal with, and the White Horn Adventure Group is clearly a big problem. Perhaps there is an adventure group in Bolong Town that has suffered their losses. After careful consideration, Bartom didn't realize that there had been a complete annihilation of the adventurous regiment in the past 2 years. He breathed a sigh of relief and pondered, "Dr. Lena, which adventurous stronghold did you set off from?" He asked, "You, instead of, you." Lena understood the hotel owner's concerns and replied, I joined the White Horn through the introduction of Mayor Robert in Calvin Town. That was 4 years ago. The time, place, and name all matched the number. Bartom nodded first, touched his chin beard, and smiled, Robert Town from Calvin Town. I've seen him a few times a long time ago, and he's an old friend. However, Calvin Town is to the north of Borang Town, more than 600 kilometers away. You've been running a bit far, haven't you encountered something? Our intelligence is very valuable. The HME female warrior placed her injured companion and strode over, with her hands pressed against the short blade handle on the outside of her thighs. Her eyes were fierce and provocative, and she said, Male, I don't care if you're a red lion or a red rabbit. If you want intelligence, you have to pay. Bartom's boss often interacts with HME female warriors and has long been accustomed to their domineering style. In the face of Yin's threats, he hugged his chest and smiled carelessly. I the final say how much the intelligence is worth. This is also the rule of Bolong Town. Physician Lena shook her head at the eager HME female warrior and interjected, regarding the intelligence about the migration of shadow lurkers, how much does Lord Red Lion think it's worth? The old adventurer's pupils suddenly shrank, and after a moment of silence, his voice became slightly hoarse as he said, If you provide evidence of shadow lurkers, I am willing to pay 10 to 15 gold pagodas for this intelligence. The two adventurers exchanged glances, and the Hermione female warrior named Ian took out a palm-sized shuttle-shaped scale from a small leather bag hanging around her waist and handed it to the innkeeper. Bartom solemnly took the scales, sniffed them under his nose, and nodded, saying, It's very fresh. It's the scales of the shadow beast, right? So, what's the specific information? Lena explained, Last autumn, we were camping in the Black Forest on the west bank of the lower reaches of the Krill River, preparing for winter, when we accidentally discovered a group of bone collectors operating near the White Horn camp. We had originally planned to hunt them, but they had already been targeted by an adult shadow lurker. The terrifying monster seemed to have been invaded by a dragon species and had to migrate, and happened to collide with the orc bone collector. The angry shadow beast dispersed the bone gather gang and was intentionally led to the White Horn camp by the damn orcs. Then, we were chased by it all the way until last year's freezing rain, when we finally got rid of that monster. It should currently establish a territory north of Bolong Town, approximately 220 kilometers away from here. Bartom squinted his eyes and asked half doubtfully, Dragon species. What kind of dragon species can drive away an adult shadow lurker? Lena pursed her lips and said, It should be a dragon-blooded giant lizard. We heard its roar, but we couldn't provide specific evidence, so this intelligence is free. Okay, intelligence from shadow beast, I count you as 12 golden pagodas. Bartom shook his head and turned his gaze to the unconscious adventurer lying on the wooden bed, saying, Let's talk about the foster care of the wounded now. Ian, a female warrior of the HME tribe, had already untied her companion's clothes. The innkeeper walked over to the bed and was immediately stunned by his appearance. This half-elf adventurer, with his eyes tightly closed and in a state of coma, has a delicate appearance, as if it were a top-tier collection of sculptural art. Bartom can swear to the Mother Earth that this is the only beauty he has ever seen in his life. If it weren't for the short brown hair with male characteristics, the knowledgeable old adventurer would even suspect that this was a legitimate young lady from a high-altitude family. Bartom asked with uncertainty, Is this a woman or a man? He is my younger brother, named Viltok. Lena sat down by the bed, holding his palm with an extremely gentle expression. Brother. Perhaps it's just a couple. Bartom's boss secretly slandered, enduring the visual impact and discovering some unusual things. For example, the eyebrows of this Viltok are slender and distinct from the thick eyebrows of the half-elves of Disa. In addition, his figure is slender and symmetrical, with a height of nearly 1.9 meters, which is higher than most adult half-elf men. However, his chin is smooth and delicate, without any distinctive stubble that marks the maturity of half-elf men. So much so that Bartom couldn't distinguish his specific age. Lena seemed to unintentionally explain, Viltok is 16 years old this year, and his bloodline has mutated, appearing somewhat different from others. At 16 years old. Is that almost adulthood? Bartom said with a smile on his face, too lazy to expose the excuse of the female physician. Lena nodded hard and continued, Will accidentally injured his head while evacuating, and he was unconscious for several days. Afterwards, he would wake up irregularly to eat and drink, but completely lose his memory. We couldn't take him on the adventure, so we wanted to leave him in Borang town for rest. At the latest, we will pick him up in the spring of next year. A head injury is the most troublesome situation. Poor little Will, may the merciful mother have mercy on him. The innkeeper showed cheap sympathy, but immediately put on a cunning merchant's face, rubbing his hands. He said, Look, this is the best guest room at the adventurer's house. Little will receive the best care when he stays here. I will send a gentle, kind, clever, and beautiful waitress to serve him, from morning till night, never leaving. In addition, Dr. Cole from Bolong Town is also an old friend of mine. For the sake of my reputation, he will provide regular medical assistance and only charge half of the cost. Accommodation, meals, waitress service fees, doctor's diagnosis and treatment fees, and possibly medication costs. I calculate that adding up these costs, removing the remainder, and deducting the intelligence fees that need to be paid by me, a total of 200 gold pagodas. Boss Bartom looked into the pockets of the two female adventurers and confirmed that they didn't have so much gold with them. He changed his tone and said, The adventurer's house also purchases other treasures, such as gemstones, horns, skins, amber, weapons, medicinal herbs, finished potions, slaves. As long as you have them, I will take everything. I guarantee that the price I offer is the most reasonable for a 500-mile radius. He didn't lie, there was only Borang Town, a permanent stronghold of the Dessa Alliance, within a radius of 500 miles. Only the adventurer's home hotel in Borang Town could purchase the wealth obtained by the adventurers. Seeing the two female adventurers remain silent, Bartom's enthusiasm is like hot water poured into a snowdrift, instantly freezing into ice. He said coldly, Of course, if you don't have enough money, the adventurer's home also has a public house to take care of the injured, although the conditions are a bit poor, the price is also cheap. However, there are some rules that I need to explain in advance. Some adventure groups may abandon the injured. As the head of the Bolong Town Adventure Union, I am qualified to take care of the property that the injured and sick deserve. Viltok is currently unconscious and suffering from amnesia. Only you know how much personal property he has at the White Horn. If you don't even leave him a copper, I won't be able to take care of his property. Well, I'll arrange for him to live in a public house, and you'll hand me 60 gold pagodas or equivalent as the cost of caring for the injured. Furthermore, I would like to reiterate that beauty is a curse on the weak. Xiao Wei, who is so beautiful, will cause trouble for himself, especially as he is nearing adulthood. By the winter of this year, the Herm female warriors in Bolong Town will hold a life sacrifice ceremony, and they will definitely be beaten to death to seize Xiao Wei. I don't want to offend the Earth Mother Temple in Bolong Town. So, I will take care of him until this autumn, and you must send someone to pick him up before the first freezing rain falls. Otherwise, I might choose to drive Viltok out of the adventurer's house. Upon hearing this, a sarcastic smile appeared on the corner of the mouth of the Hermione female warrior Ian. Just as she was about to speak, she was stopped by a glance from her companion. Physician Lena said softly, Dear Lord Red Lion, we have no money, nor any property that can be exchanged. Then there's no need to talk about it. The rent for the 3 silver pagoda will be deducted from your intelligence fee. You can stay until this time tomorrow, and Adventurer's Home will also provide a free breakfast. Have a nice day, goodbye. The innkeeper was about to leave the guest room, but was stopped by the Dr. Lena. Wait, Lord Red Lion. Although I don't have money to pay you, you owe Mayor Robert of Calvin a favor, and Mayor Robert gave it to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have rashly sought your help. would I? Bartom slowly turned around and sneered, I owe Robert a favor. How come I don't remember that? Lena remained silent and took out an egg-white stone and a letter from her carrying bag, handing it over. Bartom took the opal and opened the letter carefully. His expression gradually became stern. After a moment of silence, he regained his charming smile and said, Oh, look at my memory. I almost forgot about this. Miss Lena, feel free to ask for anything, I will do my best. Take care of my younger brother. I will come to pick him up next spring. Red Lion, can you do it? Lena asked with a calm expression. No problem, Viltok will receive the best care here, Bartom assured, patting his sturdy chest. Lena bent down and gazed at Vilek's full and smooth forehead, couldn't help but kiss her and said without looking back, also, you can send a kind, gentle, and clever waitress to take care of Vilk. There's no need for someone beautiful. She vaguely revealed the habit of being bossed by superiors, but the veteran adventurer, who had experienced countless battles, paid no attention and only nodded repeatedly to show agreement. Lena looked reluctantly at Viltok, who was sleeping, and said to her companion, Let's go back. The ordinary-looking and gentle-looking female physician declined the hotel owner's earnest request to stay and left the adventurers home with the HME female warrior. They came abruptly and left decisively, and apart from the Red Lion Bartom, they didn't startle anyone else. Through the window of the hotel, Bartom watched as two mysterious female adventurers disappeared from the protective wall gate of the town of Borang. He furrowed his eyebrows and lost himself in thought, holding an egg-white stone and a letter. He had previously spoken loudly to Lena Lion, demanding high foster fees, and had the idea of extorting them, but more so as to test their secrets. This Lena doesn't have a single word of truth, even her appearance and name are fake, but she is by no means an ordinary person. She may be a lady from a prestigious high school, and she is also a powerful member of a prestigious Disha family. A powerful and prestigious noblewoman hides her head and reveals her secrets, full of lies, and brings with her a mysterious identity. She is an extremely beautiful amnesiac teenager, which is a big problem no matter how she looks at it. However, no matter how big the trouble is, Bartom doesn't want to take over, and he has to take over now. In fact, Bartom does not owe the favor of Mayor Robert of Calvin at all, and this kind of favor also needs to be targeted. If the lower-ranking person does not owe the favor, they will not owe it, while the higher-ranking person would rather have their own favor. Lena's offer of favors belongs to the kind that Bartom cannot bear to refuse. Egg-white stone is artificially polished, broken open from the middle, and the smooth section is engraved with the marks of palace stone pillars, with one side protruding and the other side concave, perfectly fitting and difficult to replicate. This is the token of the top famous Shidwa family in Fallen Leaf City, and the letter is an anonymous recommendation letter written by the Shidwa family. Anyone who uses an egg-white stone token, along with this recommendation letter, can qualify for a career trial at the Choral Academy in Fallen Leaf City. Red Lion Bartom has been an adventurer for so many years, with blood in his hands, many enemies, and a wide network, so he is not lacking this letter of recommendation. The problem is that his most valued grandson is studying at the Choral Academy. How did Dr. Lena know? If even Bartom's grandson, who is anonymous, is well known, how terrifying is her background? So, this is a gesture of goodwill and a silent threat. From another perspective, physician Lena is willing to show signs and arrange for her younger brother, but the trouble brought by Viltok is not ordinary. However, Lena thought she could intimidate the hotel owner in Borang town, so she underestimated the Red Lion Bartom too much. The old adventurer's gaze was gloomy, and he put away his famous family tokens and letters. He walked to the door and leaned out to shout downstairs, Sarah, Sarah, you damn fat pig, come up quickly. I have something to find you for. The whole hotel fell silent in an instant, followed by the sound of dong, dong, and dong footsteps. The floor let out an unbearable moan, and a chubby woman over 2 meters tall, with a large waist, dressed in a kitchen apron and holding a ceramic rolling pin, stormed towards Bartom's room. She roared angrily, "Who are you calling a fat pig? Look at me if I don't break your face, you damn red kitten." Don't be angry, there's a poor patient here," Bartom muttered to himself, deftly running back and apologizing with a smile. The cook Sarah noticed Viltok lying in bed, her little eyes lit up, and she exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, this is such a beautiful little thing. What's wrong with her?" "He's a boy," Bartom took the opportunity to wipe off a cold sweat and interjected, "His name is Viltok, he broke his brain, suffered from amnesia, was abandoned by the adventure team, and stayed with us to recuperate. It's really pitiful that someone cruelly threw such a delicate little guy down." The chubby cook at the hotel was so heartbroken that tears were about to fall. "Red Lion," Bartom sighed and said, "Who said it's not? The guest who brought him didn't even leave a copper coin for him. I think he needs a gentle, kind, and skilled person to take care of him in order to possibly recover. Only our Sarah sister in the entire town of Borang is called kind, and skilled. And, have you noticed that he looks like your sacrificial son, Maester? They're about the same age, they don't even have a beard." The more Sarah looked at Will, the more she felt that he was like her deceased son, both young and handsome, and likable. The chubby cook wiped her tears and said, "Okay, I'll take care of this poor child. The kitchen matter will be handed over to someone else." No, Bartom said quickly. "What I mean is, he can't stay in this room. Do you think, he's as beautiful as Maester, and the Hermione female warriors in Boron are like a mother wolf? When you hear about his reputation, why don't you steal him? So, we can't speak up. The best way is to take him to the small room next to the kitchen. When he wakes up, you can teach him how to do things, exercise his hands and feet, and help him regain control of his body." After thinking for a moment, Sarah nodded heavily and said, "You make sense. I'll take him down now. With me around, look at that inconspicuous mother wolf who dares to take my poor little Will away." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Young Will. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Young Will. Time flies by, and Bolong Town has experienced a hopeful spring, lush summer, and a bountiful autumn. The business of Adventurer's Home is getting better day by day, year by year. Autumn is the season of harvest. Every year, some adventure groups fall into the Black Forest where danger and opportunity coexist, and there is no news from then on. However, the adventure groups returning to Bolong Town all have more or less harvest. They bring back important intelligence, rare medicinal herbs, amber, gemstones, gold sand, rare birds and beasts, and even captured barbarian slaves. Most of them will be taken to the adventurer's house for valuation. If Bartom's bid is suitable, on-site delivery will be carried out, replacing dead, alive, and immortal treasures with golden towers. Of course, adventurers with full wallets should spend their time at the adventurer's home. Do they have any other options besides adventurer's house here? The spacious and bright lobby of the hotel was bustling with people, and every table was filled with guests. They raised their glasses and drank freely, praising each other, some whispering and secretly exchanging information. Someone has a dispute and is making loud noises. Some people also have a worried expression, drinking one cup after another in a muffled manner. It wasn't until a group of strangers pushed open the door and entered the adventurer's home that the bustling hotel lobby fell into a brief silence. There are a total of 5 of them, 3 males and 2 females, wearing a unified uniform, a white silk cotton mixed hunting suit with a hood, a white cowhide diagonal cross-shoulder weapon strap with a white wide belt, white deer leather gloves and a pair of white high-top leather boots, looking lean and handsome. Compared to adventurers dressed in gray and black tones, they look particularly eye-catching and attract many malicious gazes. A few knowledgeable adventurers recognize that the spotless white uniform on the guest's body is woven from the cocoon silk of the underground gray moth, which can be waterproof. If it gets stained, it will become shiny and new with a gentle wipe of a damp cloth, and it also has a decent defensive power. Of course, its price is not cheap. Only the famous families in the main city highland will use the silk of the underground grey moth to make hunting uniforms. These few fresh faces must come from a prestigious family in the highlands. As for which prestigious family they belong to, adventurers cannot distinguish. In remote border towns, the authority of high-altitude aristocrats cannot intimidate adventurers who are accustomed to licking blood with their swords. They looked at the seemingly valuable stranger with a surreal gaze, as if a pack of wolves were staring at their prey, almost spitting out their tongues. The atmosphere in the hotel inexplicably became tense. At this moment, the hotel owner behind the bar spoke up, "New arrivals, you are not allowed to carry weapons when entering the adventurer's house. Hand over your weapons to the bar, and then find a table to sit down. I will give you a free can of Borentown specialty wolf grass wine." The leader took off his hood and revealed his face. He was a middle-aged man in his 30s, with short gray-brown hair, a beard, deep eyes, and a mature and resolute temperament. "Sir Bartom, I am Charlie, a second-level sergeant from the 4th Division of the Rock Giants Legion. Do you still remember me?" The innkeeper squinted his eyes slightly and looked up and down at the other person, then suddenly said, "Charlie, the shield guard of the 1st Squadron and 6th Squadron of the 4th Brigade. So it's you." Charlie clenched his right fist against his forehead and said solemnly, "Shield guard Charlie has seen the commander." Bartom chuckled and waved his hand, saying, "I've retired long ago, so there's no need to salute me." Charlie smiled on his face, turned his body, gestured for his companions to hand over their weapons, and whispered to Bartom, "Sir, I have been retired from the Rock Giant Legion for almost 8 years. I came to Bolong Town this time to ask for your help." Bartom understood and nodded, saying, "Okay, let's go upstairs and sit in my room." He walked out from behind the bar, patted his old subordinate Charlie's shoulder, and then turned to a bartender and ordered, "Who? Pyru, arrange a table for these guests and give them a can of Borentown specialty wolf grass wine." Red Lion Bartom led Charlie up the stairs, and the hotel lobby returned to its usual hustle and bustle. The adventurers in Borang still stole glances at these unwelcome guests, but they were more covert and their aggressive nature was no longer apparent. Buddy Pyru found a table at the edge of the living room, dragged the 2 drunken adventurers away, cleaned the table, arranged for guests to sit down, picked up a can of wine, and filled everyone with a glass of wolf grass wine. Feeling weak, he asked, "This can of wine is free. What else do you want to eat?" These guests are all tall and spirited young people, who may be visiting the gathering place of adventurers for the first time and feel fresh about everything around them. One of the handsome young men looked around curiously and said to Pyru, "We won't eat anything for now. We'll call you when we need to." Dude Pyru shrugged his shoulders casually and took 2 steps back, but there was no rush to leave. In the hotel, half-elf waitresses with bright makeup and promiscuous behavior flirted with men among adventurers, and more than half of the adventurers were hermed female warriors. They are all tied in single ponytails, with sharp facial features, and a cold and hard temperament. In fact, they cannot be said to be very beautiful and charming. However, the HME women have a bold and unrestrained style, wearing hard leather vests and short skirts, revealing their waist without any excess fat and strong long legs, like a powerful female leopard with a wild charm. The HME tribe is extremely rare in the main city of the Dessa League, but there are dozens of HME female warriors at the adventurer's house in the town of Borang. The handsome young man looked dazzled. Faced with the provocative gaze cast by the hermed female warrior, he unconsciously avoided the other person's gaze and picked up the glass in front of him to conceal his frivolity. He lowered his voice and said, "It's hard to imagine that these brave and skilled hermed tribes will become charming fairies in winter. I wonder if I have a chance to be selected by them for this year's life sacrifice ceremony." The male companions all lowered their heads and smiled, while the 2 female companions coincidentally rolled their eyes at him. One of the semi-elf women with blonde hair and green eyes covered her mouth and smiled, "Carl, I hope you are chosen by the Herm tribe." We'll wait and see the Herm female warrior drive you out of her tent like a dog. Carl chuckled and lifted his glass to pour wine into his mouth. The emerald green liquid flowed into his throat, and his expression suddenly changed. His facial features were all wrinkled, and he finally swallowed the wolf-grass wine. He didn't make a fool of himself in front of his girlfriend, but opened his mouth wide and let out a series of breaths. He couldn't help but complain, "What kind of wine is this? It's sour and spicy, too bad to drink." Hotel staff member Pyru approached and promptly recommended, "Our wolf-grass wine has a unique flavor and needs to be paired with our secret roasted mud scorpion to taste good." Everyone couldn't help but look at each other, realizing that they were about to be stabbed by the hotel owner. The blonde woman chuckled and handed a small bag to Pyru, saying, "Okay, I'll give you 3 golden pagodas and give each of us a roasted mud scorpion. The extra money will be counted as your tip. If you want to thank me, please remember my name. I'm An from Fallen Leaf City." The guest was generous in his hands, and Paludan, who was already very tired, regained his energy. He said incoherently, "You are such a generous lady. There are a lot of guests today, and the dishes are served slower than usual. I will go to the kitchen to urge you. The roasted mud scorpion you requested will arrive soon, and I promise." Watching the shop assistant stumble through the crowded hall and run towards the hotel's kitchen, Annie puffed up her cheeks and muttered unhappily, "A generous lady. Shouldn't she be the beautiful Miss Anne?" Most of the semi-elf young women have beautiful looks, and Anne can also be called an outstanding beauty among them. One of her male companions snorted and said, "A country bumpkin shop assistant who hasn't seen the world before, or a wild bastard who hasn't dried up yet. Anne, do you need to bribe him?" Annie pursed her lips and said softly, "Compared to Lord Bartom, the fourth-order swordsman, the young man around him, Pyru, is the friend we can make. Then, she bent down slightly, letting her golden hair naturally fall in her ears, covering her delicate red lips, and whispered, "Now, while we chat, we pay attention to what the adventurers in the hotel are talking about. A few people have a tacit understanding and naturally enter a state, eavesdropping on the conversations between adventurers, trying to find valuable content from them." Not long after, Carl suddenly murmured, "Annie, I know why the shop assistant just didn't call you the beautiful Miss Anne." Annie looked at Carl's gaze in mist, her mind buzzing and unable to think normally anymore. Shop assistant Pagoda walked smoothly towards this place with a plate filled with food. Behind him was a companion carrying a fruit plate, and he struggled through the crowded crowd. Those HME female warriors all let go of Pyru, then reached out to touch the arm, face, hair, and buttocks of another shop assistant, and laughed loudly, showing exceptional enthusiasm. Even the semi-elf waitress in the hotel would take the opportunity to attack him. If beauty is a soul-stirring power, this newly emerged shop assistant possesses unparalleled power in the world. He has a slender and symmetrical figure, with a common brown short hair. His bright eyes are like pure and flawless amber, and his facial features are exquisite, like the highest level of art. His eyebrows are slender and straight, and his slightly pointed ears are slightly different from those of a semi-elf, but it does not detract from his perfect image. It's perfect. No matter from which angle and looks at it, every line of his body forms a perfect image. Even though he is wearing a dirty apron and is at a loss in the face of the passionate teasing of the HME female warrior, there is an extraordinary charm that makes people's hearts race faster and they dare not breathe loudly. Fortunately, this charm was short-lived. After being mentally challenged, Anne and others regained their senses from their trance. The young half-elf Carl muttered to himself, "Is this beauty male or female? I bet she must be a Highland Mississippi." As he spoke, he stood up and welcomed him alone. Annie caught a glimpse of a tall and obese figure standing in the corner of the hotel lobby from the corner of her eye. After thinking for a moment, she thought of a famous female adventurer and was immediately frightened to the point where her face turned pale. She quickly shouted, "Carl, come back to me. A room on the 3rd floor of the adventurer's home." The hotel owner Bartom and visitor Charlie sat opposite each other at a wooden table. He took off his pottery pipe and exhaled a blue smoke from his mouth. He asked slowly, "So, you're now the leader of the Chain and Whistle adventure team. Are you here in our town of Bolong to recruit adventurer companions?" Charlie reached out his finger and clicked on the certificate issued by the Adventurers Guild, laughing and saying, "Sir, I'm not hiding from you either. I'm currently serving for the Golden Sunflower in the 16-Pillar Clan. After retiring from the Rock Giants Legion, I worked as a coachman for young Master Stevenson of the Golden Sunflower Clan for 6 years. Last spring, young Master Stevenson held a coming-of-age ceremony, and according to the rules of the Highland Clan, he can cultivate his own power, including a private guard, an armed caravan, and 2 adventure regiments. I served as the commander of one of the adventure regiments. Your luck makes me envious." Bartom took a puff of smoke and nodded calmly, showing no signs of envy. Charlie smiled and complimented, "Mr. Stevenson dares to entrust me with the management of the Chain and Whistle adventures, thanks to you. Bartom the Red Lion has a great reputation in the Fallen City Adventurers Guild because I am your old subordinate, which is why Mr. Stevenson looks up to me. The young people who came with me may not be convinced of me as the leader. They are all recruited by Mr. Stevenson at the Choral Academy, and each one is excellent. They have their own strengths and are also formal professionals. For example, Carl, who is only 25 years old this year and is already a 3rd-level swordsman, may not be inferior to me in martial arts. Compared to me, they are young, energetic, and ambitious, with outstanding talents. What they lack is only experience, but experience is something that half-elves will always have. As you know, senior officer, it is difficult for me to handle these young graduates from college at my level. I also need some subordinates who are worth cultivating and willing to listen to," Charlie said candidly. Bartom held his cigarette butt and nodded with a smile. "How are the HME female warriors?" "Their health level is naturally 3rd level, even if a HME female warrior with only 1 level of profession can beat Carl down with 1 hand." Charlie shook his head and said, "The relationship between the Temple of Mother Earth and the Temple of the Dragon King is cold. It is well known that the HME people dislike the famous gates of the city-states. What I want is those abandoned children of the HME people. Only you can help me choose the most suitable personnel from them." As he was speaking, a deafening roar suddenly came from the lobby downstairs. "Damn it, you dare to bully me, Viltok. Look at me if I don't slap your face like your butt." Charlie and Bartom both turned pale at the same time, and hurriedly ran downstairs to see a tall and fat cook pressing a young half-elf on the table and beating him violently. The outstanding talent graduated from the Choral Academy. The 3rd Order swordsman Carl's pants were stripped to his knees, and the chubby cook slapped his bare buttocks hard, fulfilling his promise to turn his face into his buttocks. Perhaps the chubby cook made a mistake. However, there seems to be no difference between buttocks beaten like a face and faces beaten like buttocks. Every time the chubby cook slaps her buttocks, Carl makes a pig-like scream. The self-esteem of the 3rd-level swordsman originally did not allow young people to make shameful calls, but the sound of spanking in the hotel lobby was too strange. So he shamelessly called out, feeling much better. At least winning the laughter of the Herm female warrior as a background sound of spanking, the sense of shame was actually much weaker. It has to be said that the outstanding graduates of Choral College have strong adaptability and quickly learn to be shameless. Unstoppable Sarah. Why did Carl provoke her? Charlie recognized the identity of the chubby cook and said incredulously. "Stop, damn it, you've broken all our furniture." Bartom shouted loudly to stop the chubby cook from continuing the violence. Sarah slapped the victim Carl twice in anger and let go, accusing him, "This bad guy is bullying poor Will. The broken plates and cups here are all on his head." After speaking, she picked up Viltok, who was at a loss beside her, and walked towards the kitchen. While walking, she chattered and comforted, "All right, Vil, I've already taught that bad guy a hard lesson. The work in the hotel lobby is not suitable for you. Haven't you seen these vicious female wolves? Their minds are all thinking about how to kidnap you, and I know it must be like this. Poor little guy, his injury has just improved a bit. How can he be bullied by these malicious guys? If Sarah wants to say that you like to peel beans, then continue to peel beans in the kitchen and wait for your injury. I have completely recovered. At least I need to be able to distinguish who is good and who is bad for you before coming out to play. Viltok looked bewildered and obediently followed behind the chubby cook Sarah. He looked around, his gaze seemingly unfocused, very confused and curious, but there was a hint of indifference in the hollow eyes that others could not detect. If it were an ordinary person, his current appearance would be polite enough to say he hasn't woken up, or impolite enough to say he's a fool. However, due to Viltok's extraordinary and handsome figure, everyone would inevitably have a 12-point liking for him, especially the herm female warriors who think this guy is green and cute. However, under the intimidation of the chubby cook Sarah, they didn't tease Viltok anymore. Charlie, upon seeing the initiator of this conflict, also momentarily lost his composure. He immediately realized why Carl had been beaten and glared fiercely at his troubling subordinate. The adventurer from the main city was publicly beaten up and damaged many things, and what happened afterwards has nothing to do with Viltok. He returned to the familiar kitchen, his restless mind calmed down. Without anyone's orders, he took the initiative to sit on his own stool, took out a handful of beans from the big basket in front of him, and began to concentrate on peeling the bean shells. The chubby cook Sarah didn't even care about the recent beating of a prominent servant. It's just that the hotel's business is booming today, and she's still busy cooking. She just praised Viltok a few words, and then worked on her own without any time to take care of him. In fact, the kitchen helpers in the hotel knew that Viltok couldn't speak at all, but he could understand what others meant and did whatever they called him, never causing trouble for others. If it weren't for the tight manpower today, he would only have stayed quietly in the kitchen and peeled his beans, so as not to cause this disturbance. Everyone thinks that peeling beans is Viltok's favorite thing to do. Apart from eating, sleeping, and using the bathroom, he can peel beans in the kitchen for a whole day. In fact, Viltok doesn't have any feelings of liking or dislike at the moment. He is focused on peeling beans for another reason. Viltok was in a coma at the adventurer's home in Borang town for over 2 months. To outsiders, apart from physiological needs such as eating, drinking water, and excreting, he remained unconscious for the rest of the time. But in Viltok's conscious world, there was a rapidly spinning golden ball of light that he could not enter or exit, as if trapped in a terrible cage. He instinctively wanted to slow down the rotation speed of the golden light cluster and finally come to a complete stop, but this was not easy to achieve. It should be said to be very, very difficult. Viltok took a lot of effort to grasp the concept of time through the rotation of the golden light cluster, and due to the instinctive stimulation of his body's hunger and thirst, he overlapped the time flow rate of the light cluster with the external time flow rate, responding to the outside world. This is why he will briefly wake up, eat and drink. At the beginning, he woke up from a deep sleep, and there was still a deviation in the flow of time between his consciousness and reality. There was a barrier between himself and the outside world, making it difficult for him to see or hear clearly, and unable to seriously think about any issues. Fortunately, the cook Sarah had been taking care of him, scrubbing his body, and chattering in his ear without listening. These external stimuli caused the flow of time between the conscious world and the real world to coincide more and more, and Viltok finally emerged from his long-term slumber. I woke up, but Viltok stumbled and couldn't hold things steady. The cook Sarah said he was like a clumsy baby and had to exercise regularly to get back to normal. The cook of the adventurer's home clearly had a good way of dealing with the injured and sick. The rehabilitation training she provided to Viltok was not even fault-worthy for the best physician in Burrow, Cole. Under the careful care of the kitchen maid Sarah, Viltok was able to walk, run, and hold things like a normal person in only half a month, but his hands and feet were still not flexible enough. Moreover, while he lost his memory, he seemed to have lost his ability to speak and his intelligence was also affected. Dr. Cole in the town has examined Viltok and believes that ordinary treatment methods cannot cure him. After all, head injuries are the most troublesome problem. However, he can arrange some meticulous manual work for Viltok to exercise his finger flexibility, which may have unexpected help for his condition. So, Bartom's boss asked Viltok to help in the kitchen, starting with peeling beans, claiming that it could help him exercise his fingers. As for the hotel owner's true idea, everyone knew that this miser didn't want Viltok to continue eating and drinking for free at the adventurer's house. Being able to support herself is ultimately a good thing, and Sarah, the chubby cook who treats Will as her son, does not object to Bartom's arrangement, let alone Viltok himself. He peeled beans in the kitchen of Adventurer's home for 2 months and enjoyed this tedious job. People who first see Viltok are amazed by his beauty, but those who know him will think that Viltok is a poor fool. Otherwise, how could he like to peel beans all day long? However, no one knows that Viltok has always been troubled by the conscious world. As soon as he stops his work, he will see the rapidly rotating golden light cluster, with both sense of time and space isolated from the outside world. Continuously peeling beans can make the conscious world and the outside world overlap in time and space. Viltok's instinctive cognition is that he must strengthen the temporal and spatial connection between consciousness and reality, otherwise he will fall into a coma again. With slender fingers gripping the plump pods, with a gentle pinch, the round beans bounced out of the pods and landed right into the nearby vine basket, which was almost filled with beans. Viltok is skilled in his movements, efficient in peeling beans, and even has a unique rhythm that is not disturbed by various noises in the kitchen. The cook Sarah suddenly looked up at him with a knowing smile on her chubby face, then lowered her head and continued to chop the meat and bones on the chopping board with a kitchen knife. The ping-pong sound surprisingly matched the frequency of Viltok peeling beans. The 122,063rd one. Viltok counted in his heart, feeling that something wonderful would happen soon. He pinched a pod with his fingers and exerted a slight force. With a pop sound, as the pod burst, the world of consciousness also shook, and a wave of information automatically emerged in his mind. Increase spiritual attribute by 4, reach 10 points of spirit, enter the second level of learning talent, and master dexterous hands. The current spiritual attribute is 10 points, physical attribute is 6 points, perceptual attribute is 4 points, and life attribute is 12 points. Clever hands. Your hands are very agile and can proficiently use any tool in a short period of time. Stage goal. Match the 3 attributes of physical fitness, perception, and life with the current 10 mental attributes, achieving 12 points of physical fitness, 13 points of perception, and 15 points of life. Final goal. Unlock the knowledge puzzle and find yourself. Method. Eat plenty, exercise plenty, rest plenty, utilize learning talents, collect various information, and obtain feedback on knowledge puzzles. The emergence of this information is natural, and Viltok knows what he knows, and what he doesn't know is still unknown. Just like a person with amnesia who is eager to retrieve their memories, there is no need to investigate the cause, let alone explain it to others. The most surprising thing is not that Viltok has regained a small part of his memory, but that his conscious world has synchronized with external temporal and spatial changes, and that barrier has been completely lifted. The dimly lit kitchen suddenly became lively, with walls and ceilings blackened by oil smoke. The kitchen maid made a popping sound by tapping the mud scorpion with a wooden stick, the aroma of stewed meat emanating from the pottery jar. The sunlight shines through the window into the kitchen, swirling with the light and shadow produced by the maids walking back and forth, the heat waves radiated by the open flame on the stove, as well as the wind pressure generated by air flow, simultaneously stimulated Viltok's vision, hearing, smell, and touch, forming a distinct 3-dimensional image in his mind. The sense of detachment that had been bothering him quickly disappeared. Viltok felt a genuine sense of joy for the first time. He knew he would not fall into a prolonged coma, but the rich sensory signals instantly made his mind slightly dizzy, and he couldn't help but stand up. Chef Sarah almost simultaneously put down her meat-chopping knife and took 3 or 2 steps to reach Viltok. Her move caught the attention of others, and more than a dozen kitchen assistants gathered around. Sarah reached out to help Viltok and asked with concern, "Little baby, what's wrong with you?" The chubby cook is 2 meters tall and has a plump physique like a big brown bear. When she approaches, a strong sense of pressure forms. Viltok was very familiar with Sarah, and this familiarity brought him a sense of security. Viltok's mouth curved upwards, and his handsome and incomparable face became particularly charming. "Shah. Wake up," he said. This is his first time smiling and speaking. Sarah exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, my poor little one, you can talk. Mother Earth protects, this is really great." A dozen or so kitchen helpers were also very happy, and they all crowded over, eagerly talking to Viltok. The young and handsome Viltok furrowed his slender eyebrows, tilted his head, and muttered to himself with a puzzled expression, "Who am I?" End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Habits of Amnesians. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Habits of Amnesians. Your name is Viltok. What does that name remind you of? The room is not large and the temperature is suitable. The owner of the adventurer's home is wearing an old kapok shirt, with half-rolled cuffs revealing his muscular and sturdy forearms. He is holding an unlit pipe and squinting his eyes, his cunning gaze swirling around Viltok's handsome face, hoping to catch some clues through his facial expressions. My name is Viltok. Vil furrowed his slender and straight eyebrows, his face filled with confusion and confusion. After pondering for a long time, he nodded and murmured, "My name is Viltok. But I can't remember it at all." He was wearing old clothes from the shop assistant Pyru, which had been modified by a maid who knew tailoring. It seemed to fit well, but it was just a fitting fit. The old clothes of the shop assistant are ultimately unsightly, with many patches and a hint of poverty. Wearing them on Viltok's body cannot conceal his radiance, especially his amber eyes, pure and profound. The light flowing in his eyes exudes a certain charm, making him particularly charming and full of strange charm. Bartom picked up the fire knife and flint from the table, skillfully wiping out sparks, igniting his beloved old pipe, and then slowly exhaling a light blue smoke from his mouth. The choking tobacco smell spread throughout the room. Tobacco is a thing that people like very much, but most people dislike it. Sitting across from the table, Viltok was not stimulated by the smoke to cough and even shrugged his nose, as if trying to distinguish the taste of tobacco. Bartom suddenly became interested, raised his pipe in his hand, and asked happily, "Cade-line tobacco, I made it myself, it tastes great. Do you want to give it a try?" Viltok waved away the smoke in front of him with his hand and shook his head, saying, "I don't like this smell." "I thought you liked it." Bartom withdrew his pipe with a resentful expression and took a few more puffs before continuing, "Where were we just?" "Oh, your name is Viltok. Well, actually I don't know much about your background. I think Sarah has already told you some things, so I'll say it again. This spring, 2 female adventurers brought you to the adventurer's house, who were in a coma. They were Lena, a female physician of the White Horn Adventure, and Een, a female warrior of the Hemer tribe. Lena claimed to be your sister." The hotel owner recounted the entire process of his meeting with the physician Lena in great detail, hoping to awaken some of Viltok's memories. However, he did not mention his subjective judgment of Lena and concealed the fact that the Shidwa family had issued a recommendation letter. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, holding his cigarette butt, and said vaguely, "That's all I know. I hope it can be helpful to you." Viltok's slender eyebrows kept frowning as he lowered his head and said, "Lena, my sister. Een. The White Horn Adventure. The Shadow Beasts. I have no impression of these at all." Bartom remained silent for a moment and said, "Child, do you remember those things?" Viltok lifted his head and asked, "Bartom, I can see a golden ball of light spinning rapidly. I want it to stop, and then I have regained some memories, such as spiritual, physical, perceptual, and vital attributes. Do you know what this is? Golden light cluster. Properties. With a head injury and even hallucinations appearing, it seems that he is quite ill. Faced with Viltok's hopeful gaze, Bartom inwardly cursed, but still asked with guidance, "What are these spirits, bodies, perceptions, and lives in your memory?" Viltok nodded vigorously and said, "Physical attributes refer to the strength of the body, including the strength of the skin, muscles, bones, and organs, which mainly reflects a person's strength. Mind refers to the strength of control over oneself and external information, which reflects a person's intelligence. Perception is the sensitivity of external information, which reflects a person's sensitivity. Life refers to the length of lifespan, potential, and physical ability, which reflects a person's physique. These four attributes are not isolated, they complement each other and are indispensable." Bartom nodded and said, "I haven't heard of it, but when you mention strength, intelligence, agility, and physique, I understand. You can recall this. How to put it, theory. Someone must have taught you this theory and left a deep impression on you. This is a clue. I guess you have received a good education, maybe a student from a certain college. What are the students in the college?" Viltok straightened his back and pursued with a bright gaze. "College. College. Damn college, we'll talk about it later." Bartom stopped the topic in time, otherwise Viltok would keep asking endlessly. He turned to say, "Viltok, you can speak now, and you will definitely be able to restore your memory in the future. I must first explain some rules of the Adventurer's House to you. As the head of the Adventurers Guild stationed in Boron, I need to lend a helping hand to some adventurers in distress, like some young person who has lost his memory due to a brain injury. I think I have done what I should do, but none of this is free. Of course, you don't have to worry about money now." The sturdy innkeeper waved his left hand without a pipe in front of Viltok, a gesture that made him look very generous, but what he said next had a different flavor. "According to the regulations of the Adventure Union, the White Horn Adventure Group to which you belong will bear all the expenses for your recovery in the hotel. Your sister Lena has also made an agreement with me that they will come to pick you up before next spring. However, the Adventure Group is on an adventure outside, and anything can happen. Maybe they will make a fortune, maybe they will encounter misfortunes and come to Bolong Town again." Bartom sighed and shook his head, saying, "To be honest, I've seen many wounded soldiers abandoned by the adventure team in hotels. Generally, the adventure team leaves a sum of money for comrades who need to recuperate. However, apart from a set of leather robes commonly used by adventurers, your sister Lena hasn't left you anything valuable. If no one comes to pick you up from the White Horn Adventure Viltok, you owe a lot of money to the Adventurer's House." Bartom looked at Viltok with a confused expression and said calmly but firmly, "You spent a total of 74 gold towers on food and accommodation at the Adventurer's House. You need to find a way to prepare this money. If you don't have the money to give me then, something bad will happen." Viltok thought for a moment and suddenly asked, "What is money?" Cough, cough, cough. Bartom was startled by this question. He took his pipe from his mouth and coughed several times in a row, his mouth and nose smoking outwards. After a while, he looked at Viltok with a strange expression and said with a bit of anger, Can you remember all these nonsense theories about mental and physical health, but can't remember what money is? I wonder if you are a member of the Dessa League. Kid, remember that in the Dessa League, money is the most important thing. Money costs money for food, clothing, accommodation, purchasing weapons and equipment, learning skills. Without money, you can't do anything, understand? Viltok pursed his lips and looked at Bartom, then asked, "What is money?" Bartom suddenly felt choked while drinking water. He unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, took out a small gold ingot in the shape of a date pit from the drawer, handed it to Viltok, and coaxed him gently, "This is a universal gold pagoda in the Alliance. You can exchange it for 12 silver pagodas or 144 copper pagodas. With this golden gadget, you can buy anything you want. I want to know who I am. Can I buy it with a golden tower? Will asked seriously as he held the golden tower in his hand. Judging from his appearance, he was planning to use the golden tower in his hand to buy the answer to the question from Bartom. Bartom scratched his hair and replied with certainty, of course, but it's important to pay attention to the method. If the White Horn Adventure team doesn't come to pick you up, you can post an adventure mission through the adventurer's home, purchase intelligence from the White Horn Adventure team, or hire an adventure team to accompany you in searching for the whereabouts of the White Horn Adventure team. Whether it's buying intelligence or hiring an adventure team, money is needed. Oh, by the way, there's one more important thing. Kid, the golden pagoda in your hand is my money. Now, give it back to me. The innkeeper put on a fierce expression and extended his thick fingerbone palm to Viltok. Viltok looked calmly at Bartom without any intention of letting go. The experienced Red Lion Bartom suddenly felt a palpitations, but he couldn't tell where the feeling came from. So he slowly withdrew his hand and said in a self-deprecating tone, looking at Sarah's face, I won't argue with you. I'll lend you this golden pagoda, but it will be calculated as interest. I also want to tell you that money that doesn't belong to you cannot be taken, otherwise you will be beaten to death by others. Viltok hesitated for a moment, placed the gold on the table, and asked, so how can I get more money? Bartom instantly understood that this beautiful little guy was using this golden tower to exchange for intelligence on how to make money. There are so many ways to make money that I can't say it all. In summary, there is only one way. You have to work. Bartom happily retrieved the gold and explained, in Borang Town, the fastest way to earn money is to participate in wilderness adventures. However, adventure activities are not suitable for you now, and no adventure team will take in a patient. Fortunately, you have met me, and I can help you by providing you with a job in a hotel. Viltok thought for a moment and asked with uncertainty, is it peeling beans? Yes, as long as you like it, I will pay you a fee for it. But I don't like peeling beans now, Viltok said sincerely. Bartom met Will's pure and profound eyes and asked without hesitation, so what do you like to do now? Will shook his head and said, I don't know. I'll go ask Sarah. As he spoke, he got up from his chair and prepared to leave Bartom's room. Bartom also stood up and, just as Will was about to leave, called out, Mr. Viltok, the gold pagoda you just gave me was the reward you consulted me about. You now owe me 74 gold pagodas, and all of these debts will be calculated with interest. In addition, I will give you a free piece of advice. If you want to make money, you must have credibility. Viltok turned around and nodded at Bartom, saying, Thank you, Bartom boss. You are a good person. Okay. A good person. Bartom laughed and laughed, but he never thought he was actually a good person. Viltok's expression showed a serious expression and he said, Sarah said, if someone helps me, I should thank him and praise him as a good person. Bartom couldn't help but retort, the person who helped you may have another purpose, not necessarily a good person. Sarah also said that praising those who have helped you will not be at a disadvantage. I think she makes sense. Viltok nodded and turned to walk out of the door. Bartom slowly sat down again, took a deep breath of smoke, and exhaled thick smoke. Under the cover of smoke, his face appeared uncertain. The experienced old adventurer who was chatting with the same amnesia patient should have taken control of the conversation, but now he feels even more tired than participating in a small battle. Even if a person loses memory, their habits will not easily change. Recalling certain details just now, such as Viltok's reluctance to let go of gold, clearly stating that they do not want to peel beans anymore, before making a decision, I want to listen to Sarah's advice, and Sarah is the person he trusts the most. All of these indicate that he will not be easily led by the nose, even if he is an amnesiac. This is a person who makes up his mind. Bartom's expression gradually became solemn, and he thought to himself, we need to take another look, take another look. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Doing Favorable Things. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Doing Favorable Things. Viltok left Bartom's reception room and walked through the corridor on the third floor of the hotel. His footsteps echoed in the corridor, and the doors on both sides opened one after another. The residents inside appeared at the door, peeking out to look at Viltok as he passed by, but everyone remained restrained and no one spoke to him. Walking to the corner of the stairs, Viltok saw a middle-aged man dressed as an adventurer. He hugged his chest with both hands and leaned against the railing of the stairs. His hair was a common brown color, his eyes were gray-blue, and although his appearance was ordinary, his upright posture and clean and tidy clothing gave him a gentle and elegant temperament, which was clearly different from those adventurers with poor living habits. As Viltok approached the stairs, he straightened his collar and politely said, "Hello, Mr. Viltok. I am Rod, the leader of the Iron Cross adventure, and I hope to have the opportunity to serve you." Will stopped, glanced at the other person, smiled, and nodded, saying, "Thank you, Mr. Rod, you are a good person." Am I a good person? The leader of the Iron Cross adventure suddenly froze, unsure of how to proceed with the prepared words. He reorganized his language and was about to speak when the hotel owner's loud voice came from the end of the corridor. "Will, I want to tell you that you are safe in the town of Borang." Bartom's figure appeared in the hallway outside the reception room. Viltok turned around and curiously glanced at him, then walked straight down the stairs. Rod from the Iron Cross adventure met the fierce gaze of the Red Lion Bartom for less than a second, then moved his gaze away, indicating a concession, and then smiled and nodded, turning around to walk towards his room. Viltok didn't take this little incident to heart. He returned to the hotel kitchen and missed the time to have dinner with the kitchen helper, but the chubby cook Sarah left him a sumptuous dish. Other people don't receive this kind of treatment, and if they miss a meal, they will most likely have to go hungry. Because kitchen maids can enjoy the leftover dishes from guests, they often pack and take home the leftover food, and there is basically nothing left. Viltok is an exception. He has a separate table, separate food, and never eats leftovers left by guests. Kitchen lady Sarah will prepare some dishes from the guests before serving them as Will's food. Each table has some dishes deducted from the guests, and together, the quantity and variety of food are very objective, enough for Vil to eat for a day, and there is no need to spend a copper tower. However, the hotel owner included all these foods in Viltok's bill, so the hotel staff and servants were not dissatisfied with the preferential treatment he enjoyed. At this time, all the kitchen servants had finished work and returned home. Sarah lit 2 oil lamps and placed them on the table, illuminating the dishes on the table. Tonight's main dish is a can of mud melon sauce, a plant tuber that grows underground. Locals peel and cut the mud melon into pieces, add a little salt, boil it until it is cooked, use a special tool to mash it into mud, add seasoning, and stir well before consumption. The taste of this mud melon sauce today is a bit astringent, and Viltok's first reaction was that there was less sour eggplant juice used for seasoning. But he used to be less picky about the taste of food, perhaps because the golden light in his conscious world gave back 4 spiritual attributes, making his taste more sensitive and his tongue able to distinguish subtle differences in taste. Viltok found it strange that he knew exactly how much sour eggplant juice to add, and the taste of the sweet potato would become just right. He moved his heart and picked up a piece of roasted pine otter meat that had turned brown. He took a bite and savored it carefully. The pine otter is a type of animal that looks like a mouse, with a body size similar to that of a typical domestic dog, and a smooth, silky fur. The residents of Bolong town generally raise pine otters, take their fur, and then sell their meat to adventurers' homes. The taste of pine otter meat is decent, tender and juicy, but with an unpleasant fishy smell. The kitchen maid first marinates the pine otter meat, and then sprinkles strong stimulating spices to mask the fishy smell of the meat during barbecue. This cooking method causes the burnt spices to stick to the surface of the meat, making the taste of the grilled meat sticky and bitter. Viltok closed his eyes slightly, carefully chewing the grilled meat in his mouth, neither looking nor listening. His entire mind was focused on taste and smell, in a state of concentration and trance, entering his own conscious world and seeing the rapidly rotating golden light. When the information captured by the taste buds rushes into the golden light cluster, he receives feedback from the golden light cluster and instantly masters 6 recipes and skills for cooking pine otter meat. The information feedback from the golden light group to Viltok did not appear out of thin air, just like how he continuously peeled beans and fully exercised his eyes, hands, and brain, which formed the foundation of his talent for dexterous hands. Viltok's 3 meals a day are all in the adventurer's kitchen, familiar with the ingredients, spices, and seasonings here, although he was not aware of it before, but his taste, smell, hearing, vision, and touch have been recorded. The Golden Light Group, also known as the Knowledge Puzzle, organizes the above information according to Viltok's wishes, and may also add the original cooking knowledge and skills of the Knowledge Puzzle, to combine 6 methods of cooking pine otter meat. Understanding the unlocking steps of the Knowledge Puzzle, Viltok was in a particularly good mood and couldn't help but laugh. However, in Marcy's eyes, he would wander and giggle while eating, then worry and ask, Vil, are you okay? Looking up to see the concern on the face of the chubby cook, Viltok said, Sarah, Boss Bartom said I owe him a lot of money. If I don't have the money to repay him then, something bad will happen. Sarah hesitated for a moment and gritted her teeth before saying, Child, don't be afraid. That greedy old man is scaring you. With me around, don't worry. Viltok's most familiar and trusted person at present is Sarah. He said, I'm not worried anymore, but I think Bartom's boss is right. If the White Horn Adventure doesn't send someone to pick me up, I should go find them. But please ask the adventure to help me with the money. Sarah comforted, we'll figure out a way to deal with the money in the future. You need to finish the food on the table now and go rest early. Viltok picked up his fork and focused on enjoying a sumptuous dinner. When the food on the table was swept away, he wiped the corner of his mouth with his sleeve and asked Sarah, do you think I should find a job? Sarah tidied up the table and said, why don't you do things that are beneficial to yourself? I also think doing a job will definitely be helpful for you. Well, you should find a job. But before work brings you income, you need to master the skills of the job. Before you learn the skills, you should go rest. Little one, go to the bathroom now to clean yourself up, then go back to bed, have a good sleep, go as she said, things that are beneficial to herself should be done. Viltok obediently went to wash up and then returned to her bedroom. That is the stairwell next to the kitchen, with a narrow space and no other furniture except for a bed and a cabinet. At the beginning, the cramped environment and simple furnishings brought Viltok a simple sense of security, which was the space he could dominate. However, since the spiritual attribute has been elevated to 10 points, the perception of spatial distance has greatly increased, and the ability to distinguish rich colors and sounds is no longer dizzy. This bedroom doesn't seem so comfortable for the current Viltok. The biggest advantage of a stairwell is that it is completely free, and if you change to a larger room, it will definitely cost money. Viltok doesn't know the exact price of the hotel rooms yet, but he's afraid they won't be cheap, and besides the debt he owes, he doesn't even have a copper tower on him. Viltok lay on his back in bed, with his eyes open. In the darkness, he could vaguely see the ups and downs of the stairs. He thought to himself that learning skills, finding a job, receiving feedback on knowledge puzzles, and earning some money would definitely be beneficial. What is beneficial to oneself should be done the next day. Viltok successfully found a job in the kitchen of the adventurer's home. Peeling mud melons. The cook Sarah brought over a large basket of clay melons and threw a small wooden knife to Viltok. She smiled and said to him, your job is to sharpen clay melons. I'll give you 1 copper tower for 20. A kitchen maid joked next to her, you can get a copper tower by peeling 20 mud melons. Why don't we have such high wages? Bartom's boss wouldn't pay anyone for such a simple job of peeling melons, it must be Sarah's own expense to make Little Will happy. The maids laughed and chatted along, and then they were busy in the kitchen. Now is the peak season for hotel business, and the kitchen has to provide food for hundreds of people. The work of kitchen helpers is still very heavy, and small tasks such as peeling mud and melon skins cannot alleviate their workload. Sarah taught Viltok a few key points about peeling mud melons and also took care of her own work, leaving him to handle a pile of mud melons alone. Will held a small wooden knife in his left hand and a mud melon in his right hand, and began to try peeling. At first, his movements were quite clumsy. The mud melon in his hand was about the size of his head, with a full weight, and the wooden chip knife was thin and light, making it slightly dull for peeling the melon skin. However, the edge of the wooden chip knife was not enough to cut his palm. Will's right hand wanted to grab the mud melon steadily, and his left hand, which was pinching the wooden knife, also exerted force. With this cut, the uneven surface of the mud melon even lost a large amount of flesh on its belt. The most deadly thing was that the weight of the mud melon was completely pressing on Will's arm. Over time, there were waves of soreness in his arm, and his right hand also began to tremble. Will had no choice but to place one end of the soil melon on the cutting board, with his right hand only serving as a support. I feel much better now. Viltok pinched a wooden knife and carefully peeled the mud melon skin. The light and thin blade of the wooden chip scraped against the rough brown-green skin of the mud melon, and every slight tremor was transmitted to the depths of Will's mind through his slender fingers. Gradually, the wooden blade seemed to connect with his flesh and blood, becoming an extension of his fingers. This kind of touch is extremely wonderful, and he can't help but immerse himself in it, focusing on feeling every subtle change from fingertips to skin, from skin to tendons, from tendons to muscles, from muscles to joints. This change spreads all the way to the elbow joint, like encountering a barrier that can no longer be penetrated. Viltok tried to control the changes brought about by touch, pushing his arm forward and gently turning his wrist. The wooden blade slid down the surface of the mud melon, peeling off a thin layer of skin and revealing the light brown flesh. After cutting 4 large mud melons in a row, Viltok's movements became more proficient, filled with a flowing rhythm. With just 5 or 6 cuts, he could clean a mud melon in less than 4 seconds. In about a meal's time, a whole frame of mud melons had already been peeled to the bone by Will. He pinched a small wooden knife and sighed, still feeling unsatisfied, asking, "Is there anything else?" I don't know when it started, but the cook Sarah and a group of helpers stared at him in amazement, with a haunted expression on their faces. Upon hearing Will's question, Sarah dropped the half-chopped flesh and bones, walked over, picked up a thin piece of melon skin, and asked incredulously, "Will, did you used to specialize in peeling melon skin?" "I can't remember, maybe I've shaved it, right?" Will replied with a puzzled expression, uncertain. The kitchen maid of Adventurer's home, who is not always peeling mud melons. Even if they sharpen every day for over a decade, they cannot achieve this level. In fact, the kitchen maid needs to use mud melons to peel them, and how much is needed to peel them? A whole box of mud melons is almost the amount used by the kitchen in a day. Sarah thought Will couldn't finish peeling them in half a day, but who knew that he only used a small amount of time alone and finished a large basket of mud melons. After a moment of silence, Sarah shook her head and said, "Okay, my Will is a capable young man. Your work for today has ended." Will felt a bit regretful in his heart, as he activated his dexterous hands talent during the process of peeling melons, with meticulous control over his hands. It is not an exaggeration to say that he can now proficiently operate any tool with both hands, and regardless of which tool he uses, he is more agile than those who have practiced for a long time, but only below the elbow. Intuition tells Will that if this dexterity can reach his entire body, he will enter a magical realm. Unfortunately, he clearly cannot achieve this wonderful effect by peeling the melon skin. Will believes that the main obstacle actually comes from the lack of spiritual attributes. Currently, 10 points of spiritual attributes are only enough to unlock hands. To achieve full transparency throughout the body, a higher upper limit of spiritual attributes is needed. To increase the upper limit of spiritual attributes, the three basic attributes of stamina, perception, and life must first reach the current upper limit. Just like the adventurer's home inn, the upper limit of spiritual attributes is like the ceiling of the first floor, and the physical, perceptual, and life attributes are like the walls and floors of the first floor. Only by laying the foundation and building the walls can a second floor be built on top of the ceiling of the first floor. Viltok's current spiritual attribute is 10 points, with a corresponding upper limit of 12 points for both physical and perceptual attributes, and a corresponding upper limit of 15 points for health attributes. His current physical, perceptual, and life attributes have not reached the upper limit, so it is impossible to improve his spiritual attributes. Continuing to improve his physical fitness, perception, and vital attributes is what Viltok most wants to do now. The method is actually simple: just eat well, sleep well, and focus on practicing skills. He just peeled a big basket of sweet potatoes and clearly felt that his perception had improved. Unfortunately, peeling melons has no effect on him anymore. Since that's the case, he should try practicing other skills. Viltok said seriously to the chubby cook, "Sarah, I want to cook, can I? Do you want to learn cooking from me?" Sarah looked into Viltok's eyes and asked. "No, I want to cook for you." Viltok shook his head and didn't pay attention to the chubby cook's strange gaze, adding, "I remember some cooking methods for the dishes and plan to try them myself." Sarah reached out her big hand and touched Will's head, nodding and saying, "Okay, I also want to see what dishes you can cook. Let's talk about it first. You don't get paid for cooking, and if you can't do it well, you'll have to lose money. But if you can satisfy the guests with the dishes, I'll ask the front desk staff to share half of the reward they give you." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Scratching Hands. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Scratching Hands. The Adventurer's Home Hotel is the largest building in Bolong Town, covering an area of nearly 1,000 square meters, with a total of 5 floors above and below, and over 100 guest rooms. The Chain and Whistle Adventure Group has 3 interconnected large rooms on the 4th floor of the hotel. 2 female members and 3 male members occupy the left and right rooms respectively, leaving the middle room as a shared living room. The rent for suite rooms like this is not cheap, but the Chain and Whistle Adventure team, backed by the prestigious Golden Sunflower family, has abundant funds. They don't need to go out on adventures, but can also stay in the hotel and enjoy the highest level of service. In fact, young people in the adventure group are more willing to take care of the hotel lobby, which will help them make new friends in Bolong Town, gather adventure information, and familiarize themselves with the surrounding environment. However, a few days ago, Carl accidentally offended the shop assistant Viltok and was publicly stripped of his pants by the chubby cook Sarah, who slapped his butt on the table. His buttocks are still swollen, and when he sits down, it hurts like a needle, so he can only lie in bed recuperating. The other young people in the adventure group had no face and ran to the hotel lobby to listen to the ridicule of the guests. So, apart from Charlie, the leader, who often went out, the 4 young members of the Chain and Whistle Adventure Squad simply huddled in their rooms, hoping to wait for the storm to pass before starting their own work. It's lunchtime now, and as usual, the hotel servants will deliver food to the guest rooms for them to enjoy. The footsteps of 2 people came from the hallway outside the door, stopping at the door of the guest room. The sound of fingers clicking on the door panel immediately entered the room. Annie walked over and prepared to open the door for the delivery maid to come in. She habitually opened the small window on the door, glanced outside, and then slammed it shut. Everyone else thought that when Anne was about to open the door, she ran to the entrance with one hand caressing her curvaceous chest, and began to tidy up her appearance in front of the mirror. She turned her head and whispered to her companions, "It's Viltok." Katie, another female member of the adventure group, was originally lazily reclining on the sofa. When she read Anne's lips, she immediately jumped up and hurriedly checked her attire. Their sudden and surprising behavior puzzled the male members of the adventure team. Should they take the opportunity to mock them or take care of themselves? Outside the door, the shop assistant Pyru, who was holding a large plate, was about to knock on the door again when it was opened. He saw Anne, who had a beautiful appearance, and a pleasing smile appeared on his face, saying, "Miss Anne, your lunch." Annie's gaze turned directly over Pyru, looking at Viltok behind him with a smile like a flower, and she said, "Mr. Viltok, welcome to the Chain and Whistle adventure. Please come inside." Pyru said with a shocked expression, "We're here to deliver lunch." Katie, who was petite and had beautiful features, squeezed past Pyru and took the plate from Viltok's hand. She enthusiastically said, "If it's not convenient for you to take the plate, I'll help." Pyru, who was holding a plate with one hand, looked at Viltok, who was empty-handed, being pushed into the living room by Miss Katie. His expression on his face was extremely exciting. Entering the room, the leader of the adventure group, Charlie, and two other male companions stood up to welcome the hotel staff who were delivering meals, mainly Viltok. Pyru, who was pushed to the end, seemed to have found a savior and hurriedly said, "Captain Charlie, we're here to deliver the meal." Charlie surprisingly ignored him and politely said to Viltok, "Mr. Viltok, I apologize for Carl's reckless behavior last time. Lord Sarah has already severely punished Carl, and I hope this matter has not caused you any trouble." Shop assistant Pyru was completely desperate and silently placed the food on the table one by one from the plate. Viltok lifted his pure and flawless amber eyes and looked into Charlie's eyes. The retired sergeant of the Rock Giant Legion, forced by his appearance, involuntarily lowered his head to pay his respects. Viltok, however, paid no attention. He remembered his job and walked up to the table to help Pyru put a dazzling array of dishes on the table. After all the dishes were arranged, he looked at Pyru and reminded him seriously, "Pyru, it's time you introduced the menu to the guests." The members of the Chain and Whistle adventure finally focused their attention on Pyru. Pyru suddenly felt like crying and quickly said, "Today's main course is grilled otter skewers and steamed mud scorpions, paired with fresh sweet gum, long-rolled vegetable leaves, barley broth, and a 5-person apple pie, plus a can of mixed fruit wine. I want to introduce that grilled otter meat and steamed mud scorpions are new dishes cooked by Viltok himself, and the taste is very good. Wishing generous gentlemen and beautiful ladies a pleasant lunch." Annie's eyes lit up and she looked at the beautifully styled dishes on the table, looking surprised. She asked, "Is this Mr. Viltok who cooked lunch? I didn't expect you to cook anymore." Viltok was looking around at the decoration of the living room when he heard Anne's question. He turned his head and asked with a faint expression, "Are you satisfied?" Everyone looked at each other, and Katie was the first to react. She nodded and smiled, "These dishes smell very fragrant and look good. They must be very delicious. I'm very satisfied." Viltok immediately turned his head to look at Pyru with an awkward expression and said seriously, "The guests are satisfied with the food I cooked. You should collect the reward and then give me half of it." Shop assistant Pyru chuckled twice, rubbed his hands, and sneered, "How could anyone ask customers for money on their own? Hee, Miss Katie, please don't mind, Vil's injury hasn't healed yet." As he spoke, he lifted his hand and pointed to his own head, indicating that Viltok had a problem with his head. Annie took out a small money bag and handed it to Viltok's hand. She took the opportunity to hold his hand and said sympathetically, "Vil, we have heard about your situation and hope you can recover as soon as possible. If you encounter any difficulties, you can come here to find me. My companions and I are willing to help you." Upon hearing Anne's willingness to help him, Viltok's eyes flickered and he thought for a moment before asking, "What are your names?" Captain Charlie coughed and pointed to his companions, introducing them one by one. "My name is Charlie, the leader of the Chain and Whistle adventure. This is Anne, she is Katie, that is Thomas, and Carl, you should know him." Viltok nodded, took a step back, broke free from Anne's little hand, and said sincerely, "Charlie, you are a good person, and is a good person, Katie is a good person, Thomas is a good person, Carl is also a good person." Suddenly praised by Viltok as a good person, Charlie and his companions were initially shocked, then couldn't help but laugh. However, seeing Viltok's serious demeanor, they wanted to laugh but dared not, and their expressions were very conflicted. The other party first expressed willingness to help themselves and praised them as good people, so Viltok thought it was safe to let Charlie and the others help now and asked, "Do you know me?" Everyone exchanged glances and glanced at the hotel assistant Pyru next to them. Charlie, the captain of the group, pondered and said, "Viltok, we only heard about your experience when we came to Borentown. Before that, we didn't know you. Are you? Can't remember who you are, and want to retrieve your past memories?" Viltok's handsome and incomparable face showed a disappointed expression, nodded, and asked unwillingly, "Do you know about the White Horn Adventure Team?" Charlie still shook his head and said, "I haven't heard of it." "Do you know Lena?" "Bartom said she's my sister, but I don't remember her." "Lena. This name is very ordinary. If she didn't have the title recognized by the Adventurers Guild, we wouldn't know her true identity." Charlie saw Viltok's bewildered face and shook his head again, saying, "Okay, we don't know Lena." "I don't even know each other," Viltok sighed and looked up again with hopeful eyes. "I have a rapidly spinning golden light in my mind, and I want it to stop. Can you help me?" Golden light cluster, still spinning rapidly. The first reaction of all members of the Chain and Whistle Adventure Team was that this incredibly beautiful young man was indeed seriously ill and had hallucinations. Charlie pondered for a moment and said vaguely, "Well, we know a very skilled physician, and I think he might be able to help you. We will contact him first, and we will notify you when we have any news." Shop assistant Pyru suddenly interjected and said, "There are also professional physicians in Borang town. Bartom's boss said that he will ask a physician to check Will's health in a few days. Noble and generous guests, if we don't have any orders, Viltok and I will have to go to work. There are still many guests waiting for us to deliver meals. Have a pleasant lunch, see you later." After finishing speaking, he pulled Viltok out of the house, and Katie called out from behind, "Vil, I'll find you." Her voice was sweet and soft, and her tone was ambiguous, like a girl in love. She could be heard throughout the corridor, making those who heard her think that her relationship with Viltok was very close. But Katie closed the door and became cautious and calm again. She whispered to her companion Anne, "How do you feel?" Annie raised her beautifully shaped palm and said calmly, "Viltok's hand has well-proportioned finger bones and delicate skin that even I envy. I can be sure he hasn't practiced any weapon, and he can never be a chef. In addition, his blood flow rate and heart rate are very stable, but his potential is insufficient. This proves that he hasn't lied or awakened his expertise just now. If we ignore the stunning figure and appearance, Mr. Little Viltok is an ordinary amnesia patient." Adventurer Carl lowered his head to examine the dishes on the table and frowned, saying, "This is strange. I believe that the dishes Pyru brought over this time are not the kind of food that hotels can make. Although the ingredients are still from the countryside, the workmanship, aroma, and dish arrangement have a high-end style. Let me try the taste." He picked up a string of hot roasted otter meat, took a bite at the edge of his mouth, chewed it slowly for a moment, nodded and commented, "The taste is very good, it should be said to be unexpectedly good. You should also try it." Everyone gathered around the table and began to enjoy the rare delicacy. Katie grabbed the skewers with both hands, arched left and right, eating with a smile on her face. She puffed her cheeks and said vaguely, "Viltok has an outstanding appearance and a noble temperament, like a famous young master in distress. However, I have never heard of a famous young master who likes to cook, and his hands are not like chefs who often cook. If he only provides the recipe for famous dishes to the cook Sarah, how can Sarah master the cooking skills of famous chefs in just a few days?" Thomas interjected, "Have you noticed that Viltok has a natural charm that affects everyone who meets him for the first time? He unconsciously puts himself in a lower position, but over time, his charm gradually diminishes. This means that he doesn't know how to use his extraordinary charm." Captain Charlie glanced at him and asked, "Thomas, what exactly are you trying to say?" Thomas smiled and continued, "A high-level trainer who awakens his intellectual expertise has a mind teaser that can continuously exert influence on animal companions, enhance control, and guide their growth. The trainer's mind teaser is a high-level active skill, while Viltok's charm is more like a natural trait. If he comes from a prestigious family, he should know how to use his own traits. Yeah, even if Viltok starts to regain his memory, the first thing he remembers should be the famous secret skills, which are the most important and profound things for the descendants of the famous family. He never thinks of the cooking recipe first." Charlie shook his head and said with a smirk. "Young people lack experience, so it also depends on the specific target audience to make the correct evaluation. Carl and others, as outstanding talents graduating from Choral Academy, are favored by top inheritors of prestigious families, but of course they are not young rookies with simple minds." In just a few words, they peeled off a layer of mist that enveloped Viltok's body. Annie's eyes lit up and she said with a hint of excitement, "Viltok is not a descendant of a prestigious family, and he must have some special relationship with it." Several young people looked at each other, seeing a similar guess from each other's eyes, but they all tacitly did not express the answer. Thomas said with a disguising tone, "Anyway, with Viltok's beauty, Lord Stevenson may be able to use him to please some lady from the Golden Sunflower family." The young man's small movements couldn't hide from Charlie's eyes. He felt a wave of irritability and forced himself to calm down. He took out the posture of the leader of the adventure group and said, "If Viltok is useful to the master, you can find a way to approach him and spy on his secrets. As for recruiting members, I am responsible for building the adventure group." In the innermost room on the third floor of the hotel, Mr. Bartom sat at the dining table with a pipe in his hand, puffing in smoke. Two middle-aged people gathered around the table, munching on grilled skewers and steamed mud scorpions. "It's really delicious." A strong man in a security uniform dropped his juicy scorpion shell, picked up a cloth to wipe his oily hands, and said with satisfaction, "I never thought that even an unpleasant mud scorpion could be so delicious. I guess Viltok must be a chef who escaped from some prestigious family. If a famous chef had half the beauty traits of Viltok, he would definitely not be a chef," said another man with a gloomy gaze and a thin figure. The strong guard chuckled obscenely and said, "You're right, but I've heard that some high-ranking ladies have special hobbies. The Earth Temple in the main city trains beautiful little boys for them to enjoy. Viltok may be the most outstanding one among them. Boss, someone has handed me a message, willing to offer 5,000 gold pagodas, please let us go." Bartom put down his pipe and said indifferently, "Is it that slave dealer Rod? He has connections with some big shots in the main city and has made a lot of money in the slave trade in Borang town in recent years. Now he has set his sights on Viltok. I can only say that his courage and appetite are growing stronger." The middle-aged guard sneered, "I'm not a fool. If Rod takes Viltok to the main city, he can sell it for 50,000 gold pagodas." The skinny man also smiled and said, "Harry, I can tell you're trying to sell Viltok to a prominent family in Los Angeles and make a big profit." Harry turned around, glanced at him sideways, and asked in response, "Cole, don't you want to?" Cole smiled and shook his head, saying, "No, I don't sell Viltok. It's just that the environment in Boron is not suitable for weak and beautiful little guys. I will recommend him to the Highland clan of Fall Leaf City, and then the generous clan master will reward me with 50,000 golden pagodas." Harry rolled his eyes and said discontentedly, "What's the difference between this and selling?" "The difference is that you will be beaten into a puddle with Sarah's rolling pin, and I won't be as unlucky as you." Harry and Cole bickered with each other, while Bartom laughed silently beside them. They are all old comrades of an adventure group, and after achieving success and fame, they all settled down in Bolong Town. Harry became the deputy captain of the Borantown Guard, while Cole was the only physician in the town. In addition to them, several old friends also held important positions in Borantown. Everyone, led by Bartom, has already gained control of the town of Borang. No adventure team can bypass them and take the expensive Viltok away from Borang. Bartom and Viltok are not related, so whether they sell him to a high-ranking family or recommend him to big shots in the main city, the old adventurer will not feel any guilt. In fact, if Viltok had the opportunity to be appreciated by the Highlands, it would be better than staying in Adventurer Town. What Bartom is really worried about is the trouble with Viltok. The greater the benefit, the greater the trouble, and he still understands the truth. He knocked on the table with his pipe and said calmly, "Actually, Rod is willing to take on unknown risks. It's not an exaggeration for him to offer 5,000 gold pagodas for Viltok. But if we want to build our reputation, 5,000 gold pagodas is far from enough. After all, I am the head of the Adventure Guild in Borang Town, and Viltok is a wounded member of the White Horn Adventure Group who was fostered at the adventurer's house." Harry immediately interjected, "So, I think 50,000 gold pagodas is the appropriate price." Bartom shook his head and said solemnly, "It's not that simple. The value of Viltok may be more than 50,000 gold pagodas, and it can't even be measured by money." He paused for a moment before continuing, "These past few days, Viltok has explored every room in the hotel, and whenever he sees someone, he asks, who knows him. It seems that the adventurer's house can't keep him locked anymore. I want to let him go out and interact with more people, let outsiders test his background, and we'll watch from the side." Harry asked inexplicably, "Boss, what do you mean? If any adventure group with connections in the main city is considering Viltok, then you don't worry about them turning Viltok away." Boss Bartom sneered and said disdainfully, "Remember, we are not an adventurous group with nothing right now. There is no need to monopolize all the benefits, let alone bear all the risks. Let those adventurous groups investigate the secrets of Viltok first. I estimate that this winter, Borang Town will be very lively." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Going Out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Going Out. The mud scorpions and scorpions in Borang Town are not the same type of insects. They are non-toxic and live underground all year round. They mainly feed on humus and can grow up to a large size. They have a hard shell and a lot of meat, but the mud scorpion meat has a sour taste of decay, which is not a rare delicacy. However, the easiest meat for adventurers to obtain in the wild is mud scorpions. Over time, the adventurers of the Disa League have passed down the saying. Adventurers who have not eaten mud scorpions are not true adventurers. The grilled otter skewers and steamed mud scorpions made by Viltok not only successfully eliminate the fishy and sour taste of the ingredients themselves, but also retain their unique flavor. This cooking technique is truly magical. Unfortunately, he displayed his cooking skills in the wrong place. The stomach of adventurers is resilient and extremely hungry, even eating carrion. When they can eat enough, their evaluation of food only stays at the stage of being delicious or unpleasant. The grilled skewers and steamed insects cooked by Viltok himself are just delicious for adventurers. Even the knowledgeable Bartom boss didn't think his new dishes were really impressive. Anyway, the dishes made by the chubby cook Sarah have always been sold clean, and the rest won't be wasted. Compared to food, adventurers in Borang Town are more interested in Viltok himself. They determined through skewers of grilled meat and steamed mud scorpions that the extremely beautiful Viltok was not a direct descendant of the Highland family. The truth behind it is very simple. The heir of a prestigious family cannot be a chef. Since Viltok does not have a prestigious background, he can be sold to a prominent figure in Philopia in exchange for a very generous return. Viltok could never have imagined that after only cooking 2 dishes, the adventurer staying in the hotel began to have his ideas. Following Pyru to deliver lunch to the hotel guests, the two parted ways at the corner of the stairs on the first floor. Pyru returned to the hotel lobby to continue working, while Viltok entered his own staircase bedroom. He opened the cabinet in the bedroom, took out a small money bag from inside, and poured the money inside, along with the reward he received today, onto the bed. A glimmer of light shone through the small window in the stairwell, and in the dimly cramped room, the golden and silver coins shone brightly. Viltok sat cross-legged on the bed, counting several times to confirm that he had a total of 3 golden towers, 11 silver towers, and 30 copper towers. 30 copper towers are the wages Sarah paid him for cooking in the kitchen these past few days. The rest of the gold and silver are delivered by Pyru and given as gifts by guests staying at the hotel. Pyru gave half of the reward to Will, which was much more than the wages he earned from cooking. Viltok put his money back into his bag and lay on the bed with bewildered eyes. Looking at the nearby floor slab, he wondered if he should spend some money to exchange for a spacious and bright guest room. This cramped and dimly lit staircase once brought him an inexplicable sense of security. However, as his abilities continued to improve and he huddled in the small stairwell, Viltok felt very frustrated. He felt that he should now control a larger space. Viltok didn't know how much it would cost to rent a hotel room, but he understood that his little money was far from enough to repay Bartom's debt. The most crucial thing is that Viltok has lost his enthusiasm for the work in the kitchen. He works to obtain feedback on knowledge puzzles, followed by exercising skills. Working in the hotel kitchen these days, Viltok clearly felt a significant improvement in his sense of smell, taste, touch, and hearing. He can distinguish one odor from the complex ones. You can eavesdrop on the conversation of the target person in the noisy hall. By touching the pine otter and mud scorpion with your fingers, you can easily break them down with a small knife with your eyes closed. Now, the work in the kitchen can no longer help Will improve his perceptual attributes and related skills, and he has lost interest in cooking. So, he followed Pyru to deliver meals to guests, while exploring the rooms of the adventurer's house, looking and sniffing, and talking to guests. These seemingly ordinary things satisfy his curiosity and hope for an opportunity to trigger the knowledge puzzle and receive new feedback. Making money through work is just a side effect, but being able to earn money while exercising oneself is ultimately a good thing. Viltok plans to switch to a new job, but what kind of job would be better? Just as Will was lost in thought, the voice of the shop assistant Pyru came from outside the stairwell. He knocked on the partition and whispered, Will, are you there? Viltok immediately walked out of the stairwell and saw Pyru standing beside him. He smiled and said, I'm here. You've received the reward again, you want to share it with me. Pyru is a lively and clever guy, with agile movements and a lean physique. However, his strength is not small, and he often holds a wine barrel in one hand and a large plate of food in the other, walking briskly among the crowd at the hotel. Viltok also imitated Pyru's appearance, but unfortunately his own strength was not enough. It was difficult to lift a barrel with both hands, and he only had envy for Pyru. Overall, Will believed that Pyru was a good person, delivering meals together. Pyru always tried to get as much as possible, and even if he received a reward from the guests, he would actively distribute it to Will. Although Sarah's warning may have worked for Pyru, Will was not always present when the guests were tipping. According to Pyru himself, he values credibility just as much as Bartom's boss, and if he says he wants to share the money, he will definitely do it. Pyru also believes that Viltok is a good companion. No, it should be said to be the best partner. When Viltok first woke up, Pyru, like other young shop assistants, was filled with jealousy towards this overly beautiful half-elf boy. They tried to play tricks on Viltok more than once, but were mercilessly beaten by the cook Sarah. The clever Pyru did not directly participate in bullying Viltok, but he also learned to behave well. The chubby cook Sarah is usually a mild-tempered person, but once she gets angry, she will hit people. Even the hotel owner Bartom has been beaten by her, and no one dares to make Sarah angry in Burrow, nor does anyone dare to bully Viltok. Gradually, Pyru discovered that Viltok had a simple mind, was very easy to get along with, and he didn't play tricks. Most importantly, with Viltok by his side, Pyru could always receive more rewards from his guests. So, Pyru became a friend of Viltok. Between friends, it is important to maintain credibility, otherwise there will be other companions willing to make friends with Viltok. Therefore, as long as Pyru delivers new dishes and receives rewards from guests, even if Viltok is not by his side, he will keep his promise and give half to Viltok. However, Pyru didn't have any money to give to Vil at the moment. He first spread his hand and shook his head, then touched the fine fuzz above his lips, raised his hand and patted Vilok's shoulder. He said in an old-fashioned manner, "Vil, the guests won't keep giving you money. If someone keeps giving you money, then it's definitely not a good thing." He wanted to hook Viltok's shoulder and express to the shop assistants who were secretly peeping here that he had a close relationship with Viltok. Unfortunately, Viltok was one head taller than Pyru. He had to give up and said angrily, "It's really strange. You're taller than me, but you don't have a beard on your mouth. How old are you this year?" Viltok said seriously, "I also want to know." Pyru shook his head and then spoke of his purpose. "The food in the store is not enough. Bartom asked me to go to the farm to order a batch of food. Do you want to go with me to take a look? Go outside the hotel." This mind grew wildly like a wild grass in Viltok's heart. He had explored most of the areas of the adventurer's home, including the kitchen, bathroom, storage, lobby, stairs, and guest rooms. He saw all kinds of people, and the adventurer's home could no longer receive feedback from the knowledge puzzle. His heart longed to see even more novel things, but he also had an instinctive fear of the unknown world. This feeling is peculiar and clear. Viltok knows that he is relatively weak now and should first improve his abilities before satisfying his curiosity. Only when curiosity is satisfied can the knowledge puzzle provide more feedback and further enhance one's abilities. Viltok is unable to determine whether he has the ability to protect himself while exploring. After thinking for a while, he said, "I'm going to ask Sarah. The stairwell is adjacent to the kitchen, just take a turn and you'll be there." Viltok and Pyru walked into the kitchen, while Sarah swung an axe and chopped half of the beef into small pieces. The axe blade flipped over with a loud bang, and Pyru quietly swallowed his saliva and stood awkwardly at the door. Viltok stepped forward alone and loudly explained the situation to the powerful and chubby cook. Sarah stopped her hand, turned her head, and kindly asked, "Child, do you want to go out and play?" Viltok didn't speak, but he nodded. Sarah asked again, "You want me to accompany you out, but I don't have time. If you encounter a malicious person bullying you outside and I'm not there, do you still want to go out?" Viltok was stunned and didn't even think about what to do if Sarah refused his request. After hesitating for a long time, he finally nodded and said he wanted to go out. Sarah smiled and said, "People who are afraid of danger and still insist on going out and taking responsibility for their decisions are called adventurers. Will, you still have a lot to learn. If you stay in a hotel all the time, you won't be able to learn it. Go ahead and take a look outside." As she spoke, the strong cook like a bear turned around and glanced at the shop assistant standing at the door. A pleasing smile immediately appeared on Pyru's face, like a well-behaved little dog. Sarah shook her head and said, "Child, I tell you, don't trust anyone's words." Viltok pondered and asked softly, "Does it also include Sarah?" Sarah paused for a moment and said earnestly, "Of course it's me too, but not trusting doesn't mean not believing. You must learn how to judge such things. No one can teach you, you have to suffer a few losses to truly understand. However, as long as it's in Boron, no one can make you suffer a big loss because we don't allow it. Alright, go out and play now, Pyru will take care of you." Pierre patted his chest and said, "Aunt Sarah, I promise I will take good care of Will." The chubby cook's words just now received a hint of feedback from the knowledge puzzle. Viltok leaned down slightly and said without hesitation, "Adventurers need to be brave and cautious. I think you're right. Thank you, Sarah." Before he could finish speaking, the anxious Pyru pulled him out. Sarah watched the two little ones leave the kitchen, her eyes condensed, and she muttered to herself in a low voice, "Brave, cautious. You're such a smart kid. Will followed Pyru, quietly passing through the corridor in front of the bar, and with excitement, walked out of the door of the adventurer's house. This is the first time since he woke up that he has left a familiar hotel and come to a completely unfamiliar outdoor environment. The outside world is so novel, with a brand new three-dimensional picture composed of characters, scenery, sounds, and smells constantly swaying in Viltok's perception. However, his most intuitive feeling is that the brilliant sunlight hurts his eyes, and the surging wind blows his body, making him feel the warmth from the heart. He can't help but close his eyes, extend his hands, want to embrace the warm sunshine, and also want to catch the invisible wind, but he has always missed something. Viltok couldn't explain what had happened to him, and Pyru and the passers-by around saw the handsome and incomparable young man walking onto the open ground, spreading his arms and standing quietly, as if he wanted to become the center of the world. Before Vale caused passers-by to gather and discuss, two adventurers dressed and armed men quietly drove away several people who wanted to watch the excitement. Then they walked away calmly, maintaining a certain distance from Viltok. And by the window of the upper room of the hotel, there were many pairs of eyes secretly staring at him, including the Red Lion Bartom. Not knowing how long had passed, Viltok opened his eyes again and saw the worried expression on Pyru's face. "Will, are you okay?" the shop assistant tried to ask. Viltok tried to catch the wind, but was unable to do so, feeling regretful. However, his curiosity quickly gained the upper hand. He smiled and shook his head at Pyru, then looked around, looking at everything around him. Suddenly, his gaze swept over a large wooden sign in front of the hotel door. The cotton paper pasted on the wooden sign caught his attention. Vil strode over and stood in front of the wooden sign, staring at the symbols on the cotton paper in rows without blinking. In a state of focused concentration, the golden light of the knowledge puzzle reappeared, and Viltok developed a strong desire. Analyze these texts and restore memory about them. Viltok turned around and grabbed Pyru's arm, pointing to the symbol on the cotton paper. He urgently asked, "Pyru, is this a character?" "Yeah." "What is written on it?" I don't know much about this." Pyru blushed and hesitated for a while before admitting, "Okay, I can't read." "Will, you should be able to read, right?" Viltok frowned and shook his head, saying, "I seem to know, but I don't know these words. It's strange. That's just not familiar." Shop assistant Pyru was instantly happy, patting Viltok's back and shaking his head, saying, "What's the use of literacy? There aren't many adventurers I know who can read." Just then, a familiar voice came from beside. "Mr. Viltok, so coincidentally, are you also coming to see the new bounty mission? The release time was set incorrectly, 1 day late, hurry to release manually, thanks for reminding the old irons in Big Pocket." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Pagoda Caves Clan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Pagoda Caves Clan. The guest is Rod, the leader of the Iron Cross Adventure, who stays in the hotel regularly and is considered an acquaintance of Viltok. He was the first adventurer to show kindness to Viltok and offered to help him. Viltok politely called Rod a good person at the time. In addition, Captain Rhodes spoke elegantly and meticulously took care of everything from clothing to hair, which is always impressive among rough adventurers. Moreover, he was generous in his actions and rewarded Pyru and Will more than anyone else. Based on this, Rod believes that he has a good relationship with Viltok now. He took the initiative to say hello, of course not by chance. Just because the adventurer's home inn was crowded with people with mixed eyes, the Red Lion Bartom and the cook Sarah kept a close eye on Viltok. It was not so easy for Rod to learn more about Viltok's background. Fortunately, there was a shop assistant named Pyru, and Rod spent a little money on him. He invited Viltok out of the hotel, giving Rod the opportunity to further interact with the target person. However, Viltok's current focus is entirely on the text on the billboard. This complex and gorgeous floral pattern seems to contain magical power, firmly grasping his mind, to the point where there was no response to Captain Rhodes' approach. Rod remained silent and stood beside him, observing Viltok's every move with great interest. His gaze was deep and patient, until a regretful expression appeared on Viltok's face before he followed the other person's gaze and read the content of the announcement. Danger announcement. 6 months ago, an adult female shadow lurker migrated to the south bank of the Krill River and built a nest in the Black Pine Forest 250 kilometers north of Bolong Town. This terrifying monster is very dangerous and may have attracted a group of male shadow beasts. If anyone can return to Bolong Town alive from its territory, they can go to the adventurer's home to receive a 50 gold pagoda intelligence bonus. The person who kills a male shadow beast only needs to bring back its left canine tooth or left ear to exchange for a 150 gold pagoda adventure bonus. If someone could kill the female shadow stalker, the generous Bartom boss would be willing to offer 20,000 gold pagodas to purchase its body. But Bartom's boss does not recommend fools to venture into the lair of the shadow lurkers. And smart adventurers never do things that fools only do. Bounty announcement. A wolf-herding girl, female, with a beautiful appearance. Her actual age is unknown, and her background is unknown. She is suspected to be a high-level animal trainer, but her specific level is unknown. She is surrounded by a dragon giant lizard, a deep and fierce white wolf, and a group of striped forest wolves. The wolf girl's whereabouts are uncertain, and she first appeared near the Rapid City. She once robbed multiple adventure groups and armed caravans alone, killing 85 people. Any adventure team that discovers the whereabouts of the female bandit can receive a reward of 200 gold pagodas as long as they receive confirmation from the Adventure Union. Eliminate the female bandit and receive 8,000 gold pagodas. Capturing the female bandit can earn 20,000 gold pagodas. This bounty announcement is issued by the Rapid City Council and guaranteed by the Dessa League Adventure Union. Viltok was both surprised and pleased. The specific content on the announcement was not important, what was important was that someone could read. He turned his head and urgently asked, "Captain Rod, can you read?" Rhodes smiled slightly, nodded respectfully, and asked in response, "Mr. Will, can't you read?" Viltok clenched his fist, tapped his head, and said in confusion, "I seem to know, but I don't seem to know. I forgot." With anticipation, he continued, "Mr. Lord, can you teach me how to read? I can pay you and I'll give you all the money." Rod's mind twitched, and a few thoughts flashed through his mind. He pondered, there are only a few literate people in the entire Dissa League, but every adventure team will always have 1 or 2 people who can read. I am indeed literate, and I am willing to teach you, but I am far from proficient in graphic writing, and I am just a little better than Bartom's boss. He changed his tone, continuing, he said, "However, know there is a person in Bolong Town who is not only proficient in floral script, but also has research on lost ancient floral script. He is the mayor of Bolong Town, Maine. Coincidentally, my relationship with Maine is good, and I can introduce you to learn writing from him without paying any compensation." Viltok nodded joyfully and said, "Now take me to find Mayor Maine. By the way, what does mayor mean?" Upon hearing this, Pyru, the shop assistant standing next to him, had a tight expression on his face. He had indeed taken Rod's money, and had received instructions from Bartom's boss in advance to intentionally bring Viltok out to facilitate some malicious people's access to Viltok and earn some small money. However, the people of Borang Town all know that the relationship between Bartom boss and Mayor Maine is cold, and Mayor Maine does not welcome adventurers from the House of Adventurers into his house, just like the mayor never sets foot in Bartom's inn. If Viltok went to Mayor Maine's house to study writing, it was almost impossible for Bartom's henchmen to know exactly what they would talk about inside. Rod, this black-hearted slave dealer, has money and power, and is not a good person to deal with. At least Pyru thinks he can't afford to provoke him, so the young and clever shop assistant takes a delaying strategy. Before Rod and Viltok reach an agreement, he shouts, "Vil, you want to accompany me to the farm to order food. We agreed that if you don't go back with me, Aunt Sarah will beat me to death." At this moment, Rod took the initiative to say, "Mr. Viltok, I'll make an appointment with Mayor Main first, and then come to the hotel to see you. You should also discuss with Lord Sarah whether you want to learn writing from Mayor Main." Viltok frowned and blurted out, "Do I still need to discuss with Sarah if I want to learn writing myself?" Rod hesitated for a moment, then smiled meaningfully, nodded at Will and Pyru, and left on his own. Pyru saw Will looking towards him with an inquisitive expression. He shrugged his thin shoulders and said vaguely, "I'm not interested in learning to write." "Don't ask me. Then you'll know. Let's go quickly." Just as he left and saw the announcement outside the hotel, the knowledge puzzle trembled slightly. Viltok was also full of expectations for other things in the town. He temporarily let go of his doubts and walked forward with Pyru. The scale of Bolong town is relatively small, with only a few dozen households of residents, apart from adventurers who come and go. It is now autumn with a bountiful harvest, and both the townspeople and adventurers are busy with their work. The streets are empty, with only a few and a half-year-old children curiously following behind Viltok, but they dare not get too close. Whenever Pyru turns around to scare them, these children hide in the alleyway on the street like rabbits. Despite not seeing anyone on the street, Viltok continued to walk and ask questions, occasionally inhaling deeply through his nose. "What are you doing?" Pyru learned to inhale through his nose and asked. "Well, I'm discerning the taste," replied Viltok solemnly. "Will, you're really a weirdo." "Pyru, what is a weirdo?" "Will, from now on, I can't speak anymore." Viltok did not let go of Pyru. When he saw something he didn't know, he asked, and Pyru rolled his eyes in annoyance. They walked for over an hour from the hotel on the street to the farm at the end of the street. The so-called farm is actually a street-facing shop that operates grain, and its name is Farm. The Adventurer's Home Inn is obviously the biggest customer of the farm, and the shop assistant Pyru and the people inside are very familiar. He explained the necessary food and supplies to the farm manager according to Bartum's requirements, and the errand work was considered finished. As for the money for purchasing goods, the manager of the farm will go to the hotel to deliver the goods, and naturally settle with Mr. Bartum. For Viltok, it's not yet time to return to the hotel. Strictly speaking, he is not a member of the adventurer's house, but a patient living in a hotel who can earn money by working there, but he is different from the completely dependent member of the hotel, Pyru. He came out this time for an exploration. Viltok noticed that the manager of the farm was using a feather pen to write and draw on bark paper, so he asked him for advice on writing. The steward was a disabled person with a wooden prosthetic leg tied around him. His hair was graying and his face had deep wrinkles. He looked up at Viltok and shook his head, saying, "Child, in the town of Braun, people cannot teach each other words. This is the rule." Almost all residents of Bolong town know the beautiful Viltok, and the farm manager is no exception. "How could there be such a rule?" said Will angrily, unable to name the other person, "the rules set by the Temple of Mother Earth. Go back quickly. After I finish accounting, I have to go to the warehouse to count the grain. I don't know if there is enough inventory here." The old steward shook his head and was unwilling to answer Viltok's question again. Pyru quickly pulled Viltok away from the farm shop and whispered, "Teaching words is a taboo in the Temple of Mother Earth. The people of Borang town must abide by this rule, otherwise they will be driven out of town by Lord Gangyen." Viltok asked strangely, "What is the Temple of Mother Earth? Who is Lord Steel Rock? Why doesn't he allow the people of Boran to teach each other words?" Pyru covered his eyes in pain and moaned, "Will, please spare me. You've asked me dozens of questions along the way." Viltok ignored Pyru's plea for mercy, and after thinking for a moment, he tried to say, "I'll give you money, a golden pagoda." Paludan regained his composure and led Will to the end of the street, pointing to the path to the left, saying, "Going inside is the Temple of the Earth Mother. The Herm women warriors in the town, as well as Lord Steel Rock and his men, live in that area. However, We cannot enter now because it is not yet winter and the temple of the Earth Mother is not open to the public. Lord Gangyen, he is the leader of the Pagoda clan who specializes in serving the Earth Mother. I know you have to ask again, what is the Pagoda clan? Let's put it this way, the HME clan are all women, the Pagoda clan are all men, and their number is even smaller than the HME clan. There are only 25 Pagoda clans in the entire Bolong town. The HME female warriors like to run outside, but the Taka tribe never leaves the town of Borang. They spend their days guarding the temple of the Earth Mother to take care of the HME women and children in need. After giving birth to a child, a female warrior from the HME tribe leaves her child to be raised by the Taka tribe 6 months later. If the child is a HME girl, the HME tribe accepts her. If a boy becomes a Taka tribe, he will also be left behind by the Taka tribe, but those ordinary boys grow up to 6 years old. After a moment of silence, Pyru said in a muffled voice, I was driven away by the Taku tribe and handed over to Boss Bartom for upbringing and training. The women of the HME tribe are the worst mothers, and I still don't know who gave birth to me. Mr. Gangyen can be considered my father in name, but I know I am definitely not his son, because the sons of the Takaku and HME tribes must be Takaku, and my daughter must be HME. I am an ordinary person, and my biological father must be an adventurer, and I don't know if he died. Will, where are your parents? What kind of people are they? Paludan paused and asked in response. Parents. Viltok shook his head slowly and murmured, I also want to know who my parents are. Are you also a child born to a female warrior and adventurer of the HME tribe? Pyru's eyes lit up, and his sense of empathy for the same illness gave him an inexplicable surprise. Viltok said with a firm expression, I will figure it out. I have to remember everything. By the way, why doesn't Steel Rock let the people in town learn to write? Pyru shrugged his shoulders and said, who knows? Anyway, the person who violates this rule is the enemy of over 200 HME female warriors in Bolong town. You know, no one wants to offend those fierce women. Viltok couldn't help but worry and asked, so Captain Rhodes said he asked the mayor to teach me how to read. What should I do? Pyru said with a playful smile, Maine lives on a plantation outside of town. Although Lord Steel Rock dislikes the mayor, he can't manage things outside of town. Will let go of his worries and looked at the path on the left, saying, I want to go and see the temple of Mother Earth. Not now. We can only go in and have a look when Lord Gangyen presides over the life sacrifice ceremony in winter. Pyru shook his head and pointed to the path on the right, saying, this road leads to the barracks, blacksmith shop, pharmacy, training camp, and warehouse in Bolong town. I grew up here. Do you want to go and take a look? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Competition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Competition. This hundreds of meters long street is equivalent to the boundary of Bolong town. On the left is the gathering place of the Taka and Hemur ethnic groups, and it is not open to outsiders on a regular basis. On the right is the activity area for adventurers, which includes basic facilities such as barracks, workshops, training grounds, warehouses, etc. According to Pyru, his biological mother was a Herm female warrior, and his biological father may have been an adventurer he had never met before. He lived in the gathering place of the Taku and Herm tribes for 6 years. As an ordinary boy, he was ruthlessly abandoned by the Taku adoptive father and entrusted to the Adventurers Guild in Borang town for custody, receiving a series of adventure training. There are still many things that Viltok has not figured out, such as the relationship between the Taka tribe and the HME tribe. Why do the Pagoda caves and the Hema ethnic group oppose the dissemination of writing? What does the Temple of Mother Earth do? Why does Gangyen, the leader of the Takaku tribe, dislike Mayor Maine, who has to live outside the town? Unknown things are too dense, and Viltok deeply feels the desire from the knowledge puzzle. It is precisely because there is too much information to explore and collect that he does not know where to start his investigation. Pyru invited him to the area on the left side of the street to take a look, and he readily agreed without any reason to refuse. Two people walked along the path, bypassing the row of houses on the left side of the street, and arrived at a relatively open area. This place is obviously much livelier than the streets. Viltok saw the villagers coming and going, busy drying animal skins and vegetables, and moving various supplies into the warehouse. The blacksmith shop was tinkling incessantly, and thick smoke billowed from the chimney. He once again transformed into a curious baby, wanting to run over and see what was happening, but was caught by Pyru. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities for you to take your time and see. If you want to personally swing a hammer and make iron, I can tell the blacksmith. But today is really not good. I have to go back to work at the hotel, so let's go to the adventure training camp. That's where I grew up. Pyru's thin and lean body contained unexpected strength, and he effortlessly pulled Viltok forward. Will didn't like the feeling of being controlled. He struggled several times and was easily resolved by the shorter shop assistant. He couldn't help but feel angry with himself. His desire for power also overwhelmed his desire to learn words. He thought to himself. He should first elevate his physical, perceptual, and life attributes to the current limit. Passing through the warehouse and blacksmith shop is the training camp in Borang town. A low wooden fence separates the camp from the road, and a group of people are watching the daily training of young people in Borang town by the fence. Two people in the crowd caught sight of Viltok and Pyru and waved to him from a distance. They are Anne and Katie from the Chain and Whistle adventure. Two young and beautiful female adventurers took the initiative to greet them warmly, saying, "Will and Pyru, so coincidentally, why are you here?" And rolled her eyes and covered her mouth with a coquettish smile, "Are you here to find us?" Annie and Katie are both wearing a tight combat suit today, outlining their youthful and beautiful body curves, appearing both heroic and charming. Especially Anne, she has a tall and slender figure, slender waist, long and straight legs, and a bulging chest, demonstrating the charm of women. Pyru's face gradually turned red, and he didn't know where to put his eyes. However, these two female adventurers paid no attention to him and stared at Viltok's handsome face with both eyes. "Will, why are you unhappy? Who made you angry?" Careful Katie noticed that Viltok was a bit unhappy, so she whispered with concern. Will glanced at Pyru and said dejectedly, "I'm not as strong as him." Still not letting go. And put on a pretty face and pushed Pyru away a few meters, naturally holding Viltok's hand. She smiled and comforted, "Don't be fooled by Pyru's thin appearance. He is one of the best students in the training camp of Borang town, and the Red Lion Bartom has kept him by his side for several years of careful training. Our Chain and Whistle adventure team is willing to spend a lot of money to recruit him, but Bartom adults are unwilling to let him go. The strength of ordinary adventurers is not comparable to Pyru, so don't be angry." Pyru was caught off guard and almost flipped over by Anne, feeling very frustrated. However, upon hearing these words from behind, he immediately turned anger into joy, looking up and chest up like a proud little rooster. Katie quietly pursed her lips. Annie was known as the Lark when she was at the Choral Academy, often playing around with a group of male students. She couldn't show any lark skills when dealing with a young and inexperienced shop assistant. Viltok is her goal. Sure enough, Viltok not only did not shake Anne's hand like last time, but also curiously asked, "Why is your strength greater than Pyru?" Annie replied with a clear laugh, "I am a second-level professional. Although I have awakened agile skills and am not known for my strength, I am still much stronger than ordinary people." Viltok blinked his eyes and asked again, "What is a professional? What is the awakening agile speciality?" The Chain and Whistle adventure team is ultimately an elite group from the main city, and they are well aware that Viltok's figure and natural charm are valuable qualities. In order to acquire this extraordinary trait, the top members of the Disa League are certainly willing to pay a lot of money, but in addition to his stunning beauty, Viltok also hides many secrets. In the town of Borang, no one can bypass the Red Lion Bartom and monopolize the benefits brought by Viltok, but whoever first discovers his secret can take the lead in this competition and avoid risks. Anne's performance has successfully piqued Viltok's interest, and Katie and Anne have always cooperated well. Of course, they will not miss a good opportunity. Not only do they need to bring the relationship closer, but they also need to keep his appetite in check. The matter of professionals is a long story. Katie walked over and took Viltok's other hand, turning her head to smile. Captain Charlie is selecting new partners for the adventure team, why don't we go and take a look first? Charlie is a level 4 professional. Oh my, Viltok's hands are really delicate, smooth, and soft. Katie was secretly sighing when she suddenly noticed Viltok holding her hand in the back and gently stroking it a few times. The female adventurer couldn't help but feel her heart racing, and a faint blush appeared on her round face. Katie felt a rare sense of shyness and a hint of pride at the moment. She lowered her head and thought anxiously, does Viltok like me? Katie, calm down and don't forget your ideals. No matter how beautiful Viltok looks, it's not your goal. I am the future high-level trainer, and my chosen partner must be able to give me the traits of a trainer. But if Viltok has the traits of a trainer, what should I do? By the way, he seems to have a natural charm trait, maybe he is really a beast tamer. Katie, why are your hands softer and feverish than Anne's hands? Viltok asked with a puzzled expression. He pinched the hand of the female adventurer purely as an instinctive reaction. If he had to say that he had any malicious intentions, it was like he was dealing with mud scorpions in the kitchen. He first used the touch of his fingers to understand the weak points in the structure of the ingredients, and then considered how to cut, perhaps closer to Viltok's original intention. Katie knew nothing about Viltok's habit, but there was no trace of admiration in his pure eyes. She estimated that she had a bad idea. I am a second-level beast tamer who awakens his intellectual expertise, and I don't need to practice weapons every day. Katie realized that her laughter was a bit dry, and she wanted to shake off Viltok's hand in anger, but still couldn't bear it. So, two young and beautiful female adventurers each held Viltok's hand and sandwiched him in the middle, walking intimately on the road. Passengers in the past really thought that Viltok had a good relationship with the Chain and Whistle adventure. This was actually a silent demonstration, and Katie and declared to everyone clearly and unambiguously. The Chain and Whistle adventure group has decided to intervene, while others who have ideas about Viltok need to weigh their options. On the left side of the road, a low fence surrounds a large area of land, and the training camp in Bolong town is located inside the fence. Viltok stood outside the fence and saw a large group of children lying on all fours, running and chasing on the playground. This posture is not conducive to running half-elves with long legs and short hands. Younger children are simply rolling on the ground, while slightly older children are crawling. Several adults holding whips loudly scold the children, urging them to follow the line, and even using whips to punish those who play tricks. However, even if they fall behind and are whipped by adults, no child stands up and chases the person in front with both legs. On the other side of the playground, Charlie, the leader of the Chain and Whistle adventure, and two male members are testing the combat skills of over 10 young half-elves. Carl in the adventure group is holding a wooden stick in his hand and surrounded by 4 young people holding shields and curved knives. His expression was very relaxed, with a casual and carefree demeanor. In contrast, the 4 young people appeared very nervous, holding shields in front of them and timidly hesitant to launch an attack. Their faces were all bruised to some extent, obviously from the scars left by Carl's wooden stick hitting their faces. Are you still not taking action? Then I'm going to launch an attack. Pay attention to the left side. Carl had a cynical smile on the corner of his mouth, and the wooden stick in his hand was like a long sword, lightning piercing towards the right side of a young man. The young man's shield was originally placed on the left side, but he didn't have time to defend and was immediately stabbed in the right shoulder by a wooden stick. Combat requires concentration, believing in one's own eyes, ears, nose, and judgment. The only thing one cannot believe is the opponent's nonsense. This is my lesson for you, now pay attention to the right side. Huh, I've been fooled again. Is the shield in your hand just a decoration? Also, have all three of you been scared out of your wits? Seeing me attacking your companions, you don't know how to provide support. Karl's face was not red, he was not panting, and his expression was leisurely mocking the four opponents. He waved the stick in his hand, but it was not light at all. The stick pierced through the air and made a sharp hissing sound, making the four young people dizzy and swaying. Watching the battle beside him, Pyru clenched his fist, his face flushed like the faces of the four young people, and he was angry with Karl. After all, Pyru was also a person who came out of the training camp and had a brotherly relationship with these beaten young people. Seeing them being bullied by outsiders, it is inevitable that they will feel a sense of solidarity. Annie glanced at Pyru and explained to Viltok with a smile, Karl is a professional who specializes in awakening power. He is a third-level swordsman, and his explosive power far exceeds that of ordinary people. A casual hit can produce strong impact and also come with a shockwave effect. Even at Coral Academy, Karl's swordsmanship is excellent. It's not surprising that the hunters at Brown Training Camp lost to him. After all, there is a big gap between professionals and ordinary people. Karl won't hurt them. Although his mouth is sharp, it's to leave a deep impression on them and stimulate their competitiveness. The instructors at Coral Academy also train us in this way. At first, Karl received the most scolding, until he was at Coral Academy. After defeating the instructor during training, I realized that the instructor scolded him for his own good. What about those who can't stand it? Suddenly, a person walked out of the crowd watching the drill and asked in a low voice. He is about 30 years old, not tall, of average size, with short hair that is light yellow and slightly brown. His appearance is ordinary, but his eyes are bright and lively, and his shine can leave a deep impression on people. Instructor John. Pyru couldn't help but show a surprised expression on his face when he saw the person coming. Annie looked curiously at the man named John and covered her mouth with a coquettish smile, saying, if you can't even stand being scolded, such a person will lose their fighting spirit and confidence and can only be eliminated. John said, so the academy trains professionals like this. Out of 10 people, 9 are eliminated, leaving only 1 elite. Katie said indifferently, it's not that exaggerated. There are always 5 or 6 people eliminated out of 10. John shook his head and sighed softly, a college is a college, but in Borentown, how can young people who have been humiliated and lost confidence by the adventure team survive in the adventure? At this moment, Karl swept across and forced 4 opponents to stagger back. He put away his wooden stick and arrogantly commented, your skills are quite agile, but your strength is insufficient, and your martial arts foundation is so poor that you cannot see anyone. Next, prepare to endure hardship. I will practice you well and train you into qualified warriors. The 10 or so young people at the training camp in Bolong Town showed a look of shame and anger, but the fact that all 4 of their partners were swept by Karl together made it impossible for them to refute. Adventurers are not warriors, it's not fair for you to let the 4 of them confront you head-on like warriors, John said coldly as he walked up from the crowd of onlookers in front of Karl. Karl glanced at him sideways and asked, who are you? My name is John, the main instructor of the adventure training camp in Brown Town, John said calmly. Oh, I've heard of your reputation. Lord Bartom the Red Lion highly esteemed you, and you became the main instructor of the training camp at a young age. Karl nodded slightly, then shook his head and sighed. Lord Bartom was an elite non-commissioned officer of the Rock Giant Legion, who participated in the April War. He valued you very much and said you were the best adventurer instructor. I had hoped for you, but I didn't expect that the training method you pioneered would disappoint me greatly. Karl openly despised the main instructor of the training camp, as those 10 or so young people should have been in a state of public outrage. However, the core principle of the adventurer training camp is that adventurers are only loyal to the adventure team. If they sign a contract with the gold owner and are not clear about their involvement with the training camp, then no one will dare to recruit members in the adventure camp in Bolong Town in the future, and Bolong Town will collapse as a result. So, when Chin had a dispute with Carl from the Sentinel Adventure and John, the main instructor of the training camp, the group of young people who had already been recruited remained silent. The Chin and Whistle Adventure team recruited more than 10 young people in the training camp and paid a large sum of money to Bartum's boss in full. They have nothing to do with the training camp anymore, but John doesn't want the adventurers he trains himself to lose their lives in the adventure due to the arrogance of Carl and others. He decided to give this arrogant guy in front of him a good lesson, free of charge. "Do you look down on my training methods?" the bishop asked coldly. "Ha!" Carl sneered, flipping his eyes up and pointing to the children running and chasing on the playground, saying, "Are you training dogs to crawl and bark on the ground? Isn't it just a children's game? Adventurers are not warriors. When encountering various enemies in complex environments, we must first learn to hide and avoid them. Even in battle, we must attack the enemy's back like beasts," he said, grabbing a 2-foot-long curved blade from a young man's hand and waving to Carl. "Come on, let me show you how adventurers fight." Carl chuckled, weighed the stick in his hand, and said with a playful smile, "Rural bumpkin, you know nothing about the graduation test of the college. Do you really think I'm a newbie who hasn't seen blood before? If you challenge me, then let me try your skills." The main instructor of the training camp in Bolong Town remained silent. He lowered his body, held the short blade with a black surface in his left hand, and touched the ground with his right hand. His strong and powerful legs were separated, and his feet were tightly clasped to the ground. His gaze was cold and indifferent, as if he had turned into a ferocious beast. His fierce demeanor even made the bystanders around smell a fishy smell. Everyone couldn't help but step back and distance themselves from John, who was about to be devoured. Carl, a third-level swordsman from the Choral Academy, changed his expression. Without hesitation, he threw away his wooden stick and pulled out a 4-foot-long, 3-finger-wide sword from his waist. He trembled lightly, and his bright blade hummed. The arrogant and frivolous Carl is gone, replaced by a devout and sincere swordsman, who exudes a sharp edge that makes onlookers squint their eyes. Carl's eyes were half open and half closed, and he said solemnly, "The heart of the sword is the heart of slaughter. The wielder of the sword has a heart but is merciless. If you force me to draw the sword, I can no longer hold my hand. If you choose to withdraw now, we will be tied." John tugged at the corner of his mouth, revealing his white teeth, and said, "Don't worry, I will show mercy to you." As soon as he finished speaking, the sharpness in Carl's eyes condensed on him. A common competition has spiraled out of control and evolved into an inevitable life-and-death battle. The other members of the Chin and Whistle Adventure seem not to be worried about Carl's blood splattering on the spot, and the adventurers in Bolong Town are also full of confidence in the bishop. Viltok was secretly excited and stared at the two people facing each other with wide eyes. His intuition told him that John, who wielded a dog-leg knife, was more powerful than Carl, who wielded a long sword. He would win the competition and could really show mercy. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Victory and Defeat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Victory and Defeat. Carl stood with his sword, motionless and stable like a stone carving, but his whole body emitted a sharp and piercing killing intent. John lay on the ground and waited for a while, realizing that Carl would never take the initiative. He shrugged his shoulders, exerted force on his legs, and launched the attack first. At this moment, Carl's half-open and half-closed eyes suddenly opened, and his entire demeanor changed like a long sword unsheathed, revealing its sharpness. He had just been staring at his opponent's shoulder, and when John's shoulder moved, he also moved. The vertical long sword was thrown down, as light as a willow swaying, as fast as lightning to startle the swan. The sharp blade light drew a downward curved arc in the air, and the blade swung towards the back of John's head. Karl's technique is a rare sword-wielding technique, which involves a small swing of the arm and a large swing of the wrist to create a slashing effect similar to a whip, known as a whip drop. Its sword speed is extremely fast, but its chopping power is very light, relying on the sharpness and high speed vibration of the sword tip to cause damage to the enemy. The advantage of whiplash slash is that its strike speed is as fast as lightning, and it can also allow the swordsman to quickly recover his power and change his moves. However, its killing power heavily depends on the sharpness of the sword, but the damage to armor targets is relatively limited. Young swordsmen like Karl rarely practice the whip drop technique, which has a narrow application range and high requirements for equipment and the physical fitness of practitioners. Practitioners often have wrist dislocations and cannot generate high speed vibrations at the tip of the sword, which cannot achieve the best killing effect. Karl's ability to perform almost perfect whip drops shows that he has mastered all the common techniques to the point where he has the time and energy to practice obscure techniques. The main instructor of Borang training camp has a strange combat posture, almost moving close to the ground. Karl is not familiar with this combat style, and using swordsmanship may not necessarily be able to deal with John. Due to the caution of a swordsman, he chose the obscure technique that excels in closing and changing moves as his starting move. Sword is a deadly weapon, and holding it against the enemy requires the awareness of killing and being killed. Don't be fooled by Karl's usually lively and unrestrained personality. He becomes as determined as iron when he draws his sword and will never show mercy to John. The whip-down technique was just right to counter John, who was dressed in cloth. The oscillating and buzzing blade struck him in the back of the head like lightning, and as soon as it hit, the oscillating blade was enough to cut open his head. John, on the other hand, leaned against the ground with his body pressed down, his legs exerting force. Although he was supposed to charge forward like a leopard, he moved horizontally to Karl's left in a strange way, like a large crab accustomed to crossing. His movements are definitely not pleasing to the eye, but they are very effective, avoiding the sinister and vicious whip falls, and even following Karl's left hand to wrap around his back. Fake action. Karl was startled and his cold hair exploded all over his body. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, intending to distance himself from the enemy behind him. At this point, the benefits of the whip drop technique, which excels at collecting force, are fully revealed. Karl's relaxed muscles instantly tighten, and his ankles, legs, hips, back, and shoulders exert force layer by layer. The straight sprint movement suddenly changes. He turned his ankle, bent his knees, and quickly turned around like a spinning top. The long sword in his hand swung a mournful curved blade light. Turn back and slay. As John said, beasts are accustomed to launching attacks from behind their prey because this angle is the safest for attackers. How could the half-elf warriors of the Desert League not know the danger of backstabbing? Therefore, the swordsman's return slash is specifically used to deal with enemies who enjoy backstabbing. The key to turning back and slaying is not to turn around, but to complete the turn while charging forward, and then counterattack the enemy behind with a single sword. Karl's comeback slash was unreserved and he did his best. Even the strictest swordsmanship instructor at the Choral Academy couldn't find any flaws. In the sound of the blade cutting through the air, the bright sword light was like a brilliant and dazzling rainbow, poignant and deadly. The most wonderful thing is that Karl's sword is different from the standard back slash. He bends his knees and rotates back from bottom to top, not only fully exerting his waist and back strength, but also driving the long sword from right to left, from low to high, to make a spiral diagonal slash. Due to John's low position, the standard comeback slash is likely to fail in response to his crawling outburst, but if he wants to stab Karl with his back close to his body, he will inevitably increase his position. In this way, Karl's oblique turn back slash can just cut him in two. Being adaptable in fierce battles precisely reflects the difference between genius and mediocrity, and this kind of thing is always easy to say but difficult to do. It should be noted that practicing a technique thousands of times a day can turn it into a human instinctive reaction. The speed of wielding a sword is faster than the swordsman's thoughts, and the angle and strength of the attack are completed by muscle memory, making it difficult to make changes. Karl is able to break the shackles of swordsmanship and adapt his moves to local conditions. His swordsmanship skills can be described as stunning. However, John seemed to have an early insight into his opponent's intentions. He tapped on the ground with his elbow, sliding forward like a swimming snake, and the slanting sword light swept over his head. Just as Karl turned around, John made a simple lunge and stabbed his opponent's abdomen with his black dog-head curved knife, which instantly extended his arm. Calgon didn't have the time to react, he just felt a chill in his lower abdomen and his heart turned to ashes. The intense fear of death seized his mind, instead stimulating the potential of the third-level professional. Karl's face was twisted, and his throat gave out a fierce roar like a dying beast. The sword in his hand cut and stabbed at John like a storm. The crisscross sword light formed a silver net, and he wanted to die with the enemy in front of his eyes. This time, it was John's turn to change his face. He didn't expect Karl to become so fierce when he went crazy, with a significant increase in strength and speed. One sword light hadn't extinguished yet, and another sword light came one after another. Faced with a life-and-death crisis, the bishop of the training camp rolled and dodged directly on the ground. This is his own created combat style, and it is also easy to apply. Although ground rolling can avoid most high-altitude attacks, its rolling speed is far slower than that of Karl in an upright position. Although John was not in a panic, his body was like being filled with springs, and every part could exert force. He saw his back against the ground, sliding backwards in a strange posture, first escaping from the sharp silver sword net, and then suddenly bouncing up his dog-leg knife, with the blade just touching the side of Karl's long sword. With a buzzing sound, the sharp sword light suddenly extinguished, and Karl's long sword in his hand was surprisingly shaken out. The high-quality portable sword slipped out of his hand, and the weapon was gone. Swordsman Karl immediately regained his sanity. He quickly checked his stomach and found that his combat suit was only pierced by a dog-leg curved knife, but it did not harm his skin, not even a drop of blood. Karl breathed a long sigh of relief, and his whole body also became discouraged. At this moment, he must admit that John's combat skills are extraordinary and beyond his reach. In fact, from Karl's whip attack, comeback, madness, to being shot down by John with his long sword, the competition between the two sides was completed in the midst of lightning and fire, so fast that it was overwhelming. The vast majority of people have not seen clearly the attack and defense process of both sides in the battle, and this extremely dangerous real sword battle has come to an end. John, the main instructor of the adventure training camp, won completely, while Karl, the third-level swordsman from Coral Academy, lost. The scene fell into a dead silence. Pop, pop, pop. A sudden round of applause echoed among the onlookers, and Viltok applauded while smiling, saying, "It's a very exciting competition. John won, Karl lost. There's a big gap in your strength." Viltok has a handsome appearance and often exudes the aura of a superior, even Bartom's boss is sometimes captivated by his temperament. He commented on the tone of the battle between the two sides, just like a prominent figure from a high-ranking family watching a wonderful performance between two subordinates. No one agrees with Viltok, and there are even many people secretly muttering. "It seems like you can see it clearly." However, Viltok was right. John's leniency towards the third-level swordsman Karl in the fierce battle is enough to demonstrate a significant gap in strength between the two sides. Viltok walked out of the crowd and bent down to pick up the long sword that had been shaken away by John's blow. His hand held the hilt of the sword, and he immediately felt a very familiar feeling, unable to resist wanting to dance a sword flower. Unfortunately, the weight of this sword was even heavier than he had expected. He tried several times but couldn't succeed, so he furrowed his slender eyebrows and angrily threw off the shiny silver sword. Originally, everyone's gaze was drawn to Viltok. As he picked up his long sword, they thought he might be a hidden swordsman. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but chuckle to themselves, and Anne and Katie, the two young ladies, simply burst out laughing. Due to Viltok's interruption, the dull and solemn atmosphere was swept away. Charlie, the leader of the Chain and Whistle adventure, walked up to Carl and patted his shoulder as a consolation. He then turned to John and said, "Have you mastered the mirror's heart?" Carlton, feeling dejected, his eyes lit up and his face looked at John in surprise. Ordinary people may not understand, but professionals at the Choral Academy know that the so-called mirror heart is a wonderful spiritual realm. People who master the state of mind can finally control their bodies, not only challenging powerful professionals, but also easily defeating opponents. In the Dissa League, there are many professionals who awaken their expertise, while in comparison, there are very few strong players in the realm. If John is a master of the mirror heart, it is only natural for Carl to lose to him. Graduates from colleges are all elites who have been repeatedly tempered and can withstand setbacks. Those useless students have long been eliminated by the college. Carl wouldn't be discouraged by losing to John in public. He exclaimed excitedly, "I was convinced that I lost." "You have mastered mirror heart, using the training method of learning how to crawl beasts on the ground. Can you teach me?" "I can pay." John opened his mouth and exhaled a scorching breath. He didn't win easily just now. The explosive power of a level 3 swordsman was indeed terrifying. The brief confrontation made his muscles and joints ache and swell all over his body until now. "I'm a bit close to the mirror center. As for the practice method, you've all seen it, there's nothing to hide," John shook his head and said lightly. Carl wanted to say something more, but Captain Charlie spoke up first and said, "John, you're very strong. I'm Carl's captain, a level 4 shield guard who awakens his physical abilities. Let's have a competition." Ordinary soldiers may achieve the level of a third-level professional through diligent training in terms of physical fitness and combat skills, but the fourth level is the watershed between a professional and an ordinary person, and both sides are not on the same level. The third-level swordsman Carl has exceptional talent and superb swordsmanship, but he is by no means a match for the fourth-level professional Charlie. John said angrily, "I'm not sure I'll win over you, I won't fight." Charlie nodded solemnly, feeling relieved in his heart. He didn't actually have absolute confidence in defeating John, but this young bishop was too sensible and gave Charlie face in front of everyone. In the future, the 4 professionals of the adventure team will definitely settle down for a period of time, and the newly recruited members will also show great respect to Captain Charlie. "It's getting late, so I'll take my team members back to their base for rest. Coach John, you proved your strength today, and we'll visit you another day to learn about the tactics and techniques of the adventure team." Charlie paused and said politely, "I know you're unlikely to join any adventure team, but if you change your mind in the future, I hope you'll consider our Chain and Whistle adventure team first." Charlie left the training camp with the adventurers and a dozen new members. As the swordsman Carl left, he turned around and shouted to John, "Instructor, I will come to find you. You also teach me the combat skills of adventurers." Seeing that there was no excitement to watch, the crowd around gradually dispersed, but Viltok did not leave. He walked up to John and said seriously, "I recognize you." John was taken aback and said, "I also recognize you, Viltok. We met at the Adventurer's House Hotel." Viltok extended his finger and turned to point out several adventurers scattered not far away, saying, "I recognize your scent. Since I left the hotel, you, him, and he have been around me all along. I didn't notice at the time, but now I remember your scent." John couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. They had been secretly protecting Viltok on Bartum's orders. Unexpectedly, Viltok could distinguish the scent on their bodies. Does he have the nose of a snake-tailed vulture? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Inspiration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Inspiration. The snake-tailed vulture is a large scavenger raptor with a very sensitive sense of smell. When hovering at high altitudes, it can smell the smell of dead bodies more than 10 kilometers away. Of course, Viltok's nose is not so exaggerated. In fact, his current sensory abilities, including visual, auditory, olfactory, taste, and tactile sensitivity, are slightly stronger than the average level of ordinary people. However, all the smells he smelled were handed over to the Golden Light Cluster in the conscious world for processing, recorded by the Golden Light Cluster, and feedback was obtained when needed. This is an incredible ability. Besides a few stimulating and familiar smells, how many flavors can an ordinary person's brain distinguish? The vast majority of odors that are useless to humans are often directly ignored. The Golden Light Cluster in Viltok's conscious world can help him distinguish various odors. In fact, it is not only about odors, but also about images, sounds, touch, and other information, just like another person living in his body, faithfully recording, processing, and feedback various perceptual information without Viltok's worries. The process of recording, distinguishing, and providing feedback to external information by the Golden Light Cluster lasts about 10 hours. If the perceived information is not repeatedly reinforced during this period, Viltok's ability to recognize information will gradually weaken until it completely disappears. In layman's terms, it's called forgetting, which is no different from an ordinary person, but within 10 hours, his perceptual recognition ability is incredibly strong. When Viltok first woke up, he was like a confused baby, liking to see and listen to everything he encountered, then touch it with his hands, smell it with his nose, and taste it with his mouth open. For this reason, he made many jokes at the adventurer's house, and many HME female warriors were harassed by him. That is to say, Viltok is beautiful, otherwise those irritable ethnic minorities would have beaten him into a pig's head. This is also the reason why the Hermione female warrior who spends time in the tavern likes to tamper with Will. Isn't it at a disadvantage not to flirt with this beautiful half-elf boy in the opposite direction? Viltok developed a habit of sniffing odors in the hotel kitchen. He left the adventurer's house for the first time and came to unfamiliar streets, still occasionally sniffing odors with his nose. There are relatively few pedestrians on the streets of Bolongzon, with a few scattered people around Viltok. He didn't pay attention until John jumped out and had a fight with Carl. The scent on John's body successfully corresponds to the scent recorded by the Golden Light Cluster. Following this train of thought, Viltok identified all three other people who had been following him without any mistakes. Viltok was unaware that his perceptual discrimination was different from that of ordinary people, and thought that everyone was the same. So, he hasn't consulted anyone, even the chubby cook Sarah doesn't know how special he really is. John never expected Viltok to have such incredible abilities. He and three other companions were all elite confidants trained by Bartom and others, and were ordered to secretly protect Viltok. Due to adventurers often moving in complex jungle environments, the most common dangers they encounter are those sharp-smelling beasts and monsters. Experienced adventurers are accustomed to tidying themselves up and striving to avoid strong odors, otherwise walking in the Black Forest is like a lighthouse attracting monsters. John and his companions had a faint scent and could even avoid the sniffing of various beasts and monsters, but they were accurately identified by Viltok. Ordinary people may not think this is inappropriate, but the bishop of the adventurer training camp only feels a chill in his spine. Although snake-tailed vultures have a keen sense of smell, their small and pitiful brains can only remember the smell of carrion. They have never heard of snake-tailed vultures reacting to other flavors. How did Viltok do it? Is he a monster? When John saw Will as a monster, Viltok had already started to get started. He first grabbed John's hand and squeezed it, then grab your arm and pinch it, hold down your shoulder and pinch it again. Fortunately, he has now changed his bad habit of biting people with his mouth. Sarah taught him that doing so is not right. John is quite familiar with Viltok's situation and does not get angry at the other person's confusing behavior. He just takes a step back, but he does not know that being touched by Viltok's arm is truly terrifying. Viltok could easily remove his arm with just a bone cleaver, just like handling a lamb leg. What bad thoughts can a simple Viltok have? He is just satisfying his curiosity. Viltok asked straightforwardly, the muscles on your arm are very solid. Apart from that, there's nothing special about it. Why can you bounce yourself off the ground with just your elbow? John's face turned bitter. He had never spoken to Viltok, but he heard that if someone didn't have some patience, it was best not to answer Viltok's questions, otherwise they would be overwhelmed by his questions. It can be achieved through practice, John replied in concise sentences as much as possible. Viltok's gaze turned to the training camp playground, pointing to the children running on all fours and climbing over obstacles. He asked, train like they do. I also want to give it a try. As he spoke, he strode towards the playground, but John decisively stopped him and quickly advised, it's dangerous for you to practice this. Viltok glanced at the boys and children crawling around on the playground and said disapprovingly, dangerous. I don't think. They can crawl, so can I. Actually, John's concerns have some truth. Crawling training needs to start from a young age. Children with light bodies and short legs, even if they accidentally fall, there is no problem. The children adopted by the training camp in Bolong Town practice crawling, rolling, crawling, and overcoming obstacles every day. As they practice for a long time, their skills become more agile and proficient, and their mistakes continue to decrease. This is a gradual process. Of course, in order to adapt to this climbing activity, young people from the training camp are generally thin and short in stature. Viltok is 1.88 meters tall and has a pair of long legs. His body proportions are indeed attractive, but it will be difficult for people with long legs to climb on all fours. In addition, Viltok has never practiced climbing before, so John can almost imagine what it would be like for him to fall. Wrestling is common among children, but due to Viltok's height and weight, if he falls, he may inevitably suffer some injuries. Getting a bruised and swollen face from falling is a small matter, but if you break your face, it would be troublesome. Viltok's net worth is at least 50,000 gold pagodas. If all these gold were melted and then cast into a gold statue of the same size as him, about 4 could be cast. Not to mention breaking his face, even if Viltok had a few more bloodstains on his hand, John thought it was a crime. Boss Bartom specifically reminded John and his team to protect this walking treasure. John believed that in necessary circumstances, he should take action to subdue the disobedient Viltok, even if he was stripped of his pants and spanked hard by Aunt Sarah afterwards, he should not let the walking treasure get injured in the training camp. With the determination to be beaten at all costs, John was about to refuse Viltok with righteousness when he suddenly caught sight of a middle-aged man with a thin and gloomy face in the crowd. This person is Dr. Cole from Bolong Town, and also the fourth person in the adventurer's house. He nodded faintly at John, who understood and immediately changed his mind to Viltok, all right, you can give it a try. Come with me, I'll find someone to demonstrate to you first. Me, brother John, I can teach him. Pyru, who had been following Viltok, ran ahead, his face flushed with excitement. If Bartom, Cole, and others were the first pioneers of the adventurer's house, then John and others were the second-generation successors they painstakingly cultivated, and dozens of nearly adult shop assistants in the hotel were the third-generation seeds. According to Bartom's boss, shop assistants like Pyru are considered not for sale, and they are certainly different from other trainees in the training camp. Shop assistant Pyru was also taught by John hand to hand, and their emotions were like father and son brothers. Seeing John's cheerful expression, John knew he wanted to show off his skills in front of Viltok. Okay, you go to the jungle training ground ahead and show it to Viltok. There's no one there at the moment. I also want to know if your skills have declined these days. John reached out and patted Pyru's shoulder, smiling affectionately. The jungle training ground is not a real jungle. A dozen-acre area is planted with dozens of low thorns, and there is also an elevated structure made of round wood, even simulating the environment of a jungle. Pyru took off his boots, ran barefoot, and happily entered the training ground. Standing behind a thicket of thorns, he waved to John, indicating that he was ready. John nodded, and a middle-aged instructor next to him released two thin gray-haired hunting dogs. They happily wagged their tails and rushed towards Pyru at lightning speed. I saw Pyru, who was short, disappear under the thorny bushes. This kind of little hunting dog doesn't bite Pyru, it wants to find him to play games. If Pyru is found by the hunting dog, his training is considered a failure. Viltok and John stood on a higher ground, and when they saw Pyru, they squatted and moved horizontally, like beetles, sometimes crawling and swimming, like a snake, sometimes using both hands and feet, jumping back and forth, like a cat. He occasionally pokes his head to look, but at most, his position is only slightly higher than that of a thorn bush. He tried his best not to make any sound and could hardly see the two little hunting dogs. The hunting dogs couldn't see him either. Both sides are playing hide and seek in the training ground based on their feelings. John explained to Viltok, fighting is not the main responsibility of adventurers. Exploring, collecting, and stealing treasures is what adventurers often do. Of course, fighting is also a skill that adventurers must learn, but in any case, adventurers must first understand how to preserve themselves and their companions. Strength, speed, agility, physical fitness, and brain are all the foundations of adventurer training, but the most important thing is inspiration, a kind of inspiration that can connect all these basic things. If adventurers do various basic training alone, a whole day is not enough, and everyone's physical conditions are different, so the inspiration is also different. So, my training method starts with imitating animals climbing. Each little one in the training camp climbs according to their own method, without any standard skills or key points. I don't care how they climb, as long as they can achieve the goals I ask for. All the basic training content is included in climbing training, and it can also exercise muscles that are not usually used. In addition, our body is accustomed to walking upright, and practitioners who want to climb better than others must grasp their own inspiration. To help them find inspiration, I set up different difficulty training ranges, starting from mud, then sand, gravel, pool area, obstacle area, and finally jungle. As you can see now, my training method has no secrets at all. As long as they find their inspiration, their bodies will become coordinated. Running, jumping, climbing, swimming are all fine, and with some combat and hunting training added, they can leave the training camp and join the adventure team. Speaking, Pyru had successfully backstabbed two small hunting dogs on his side, and he held their necks with both hands, laughing happily there. John seemed dissatisfied with Pyru's performance and shouted, "Pyru, you're slower than before. Starting today, you have to come to the training ground every day to participate in training until you satisfy me." Pyru put down the hunting dogs and drove them away with his feet, exclaiming, "The boss will deduct my wages. I don't care. If you dare to come or not, I'll have someone beat you up." John waved his fist and threatened Pyru. Viltok suddenly interjected and said, "What you just said makes sense. Can I train now?" John forced himself not to look back at Dr. Cole's expression and faced the eager Viltok, saying awkwardly, "Well, for training, you have to start from the mud." Viltok did not make any higher demands, even for the lowest level of training. He was eager to give it a try. John brought Will and Pyru to the mud training ground. Under his command, several instructors quickly cleared the ground and took away a group of 6 or 7-year-old mud monkeys, leaving the ground for Viltok to enjoy alone. Viltok walked into the pitch-black and soft muddy ground, trying to run inside with all 4 limbs on the ground. He showed astonishing perseverance and determination, never kneeling down and crawling on his knees. Then, he began to perform various fall movements, including side falls, forward falls, and continuous falls, always falling. As long as he ran faster, he would fall in various ways. Pyru laughed loudly beside him, and Will fell incessantly on the muddy ground. He had already laughed to the point where he covered his stomach and twitched. John is really worried that Pyru will die like this. Dr. Cole, who was hiding in the dark, couldn't bear to look anymore. He covered his face with both hands and rubbed it up and down, thinking to himself. Viltok really hasn't received combat training. Okay, he's very beautiful, that's enough. Viltok doesn't care what others think or think, he focuses on training himself, even if in the eyes of others, he is playing with mud until he gets lost. After struggling until the sky gradually darkened, Viltok finally found the inspiration to run on all fours in the mud, running from one end of the field to the other without falling throughout. How to put it, John thinks Viltok's training results are very good, and none of those 6 or 7-year-old kids can match him. Considering Viltok's height, weight, and zero training foundation, John's conclusion is that he has talent, but he is too tall to complete the rest of the training program. Viltok was satisfied and had lost interest in training at other venues. He volunteered to go back to the hotel to rest. John, Pyru, and others escorted Viltok to the door of the adventurer's house, but they didn't enter and all ran away in a flash. Sure enough, Viltok, covered in mud and unable to see his true colors, immediately caused a small commotion upon entering the door. When he went out, he was still fine, but when he returned, he turned into a big mud monkey. The chubby cook Sarah was so heartbroken that all the waitresses and maids in the hotel gathered around and greeted Viltok, wiping his hands and face. The hotel owner Bartom was even more indignant, clamoring to go find Pyru to settle the accounts. I don't know if Boss Bartom has found Pyru, but he didn't come back the night he went out. Viltok went to the bathroom first, took a comfortable hot bath, changed into clean clothes, and then went to the kitchen. Sarah has prepared dinner for him, and while he was eating, he said to the chubby cook who was still nagging, "Sarah, I'm going to change rooms today. That staircase is no longer suitable for me." End of this chapter.